And once it is alive and well, we will get into the show because, boy, today was a doozy, wasn't it? We've got a lot to talk about. We got to wait for YouTube to just fire up here, and then we will get started. And it looks like we are alive and well, so let's do it. Hello, my friends, and welcome yet to another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. We help them navigate through the justice system, and over our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with that very justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a thing called justice, and it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and I to follow, but sometimes they have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. And so that's why we started this program called Watching the Watchers Live, so that together we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon that very system with the hope of encouraging some meaningful change. We're very grateful that you are here and with us today because we do have to talk about some malfeasance, but not from prosecutors, not from police, not from judges or the politicians so much, but sort of just the everyday citizens. What the hell happened today in Washington, D.C.? We're going to be talking a lot about that. I want to go through a little bit about my perspective on sort of how this was unfolding for us today, but we are going to get into a little bit of legal analysis. A lot of this is going to be sort of recapping what happened and maybe talking about some different permutations on how this all unfolded. But we are going to talk in the program today a little bit about the U.S. Code Section 253, 254, specifically the Insurrection Act. We're going to talk about some of the definitions that I've been seeing thrown around today. Of course, things like sedition, treason. We've got a coup and so on. We're going to sort of define that out a little bit, and we'll talk about how all those laws apply in the context of what we witnessed today. We're going to talk about Mike Pence. They started counting the electoral votes this morning. I was at the afternoon on the East Coast, and they got to Arizona. There was an objection for Arizona. Mike Pence also issued a public statement today. And so we'll sort of detail at the end of the program how I think this is going to continue to move forward. I do believe that we're going to be back to regular business tomorrow. But, today was a doozy. It was a problematic day across the board. First and foremost, just to get it out of the way, I do not condone anything that happened today. I mean, I've been very, very sort of like a broken record on this channel talking about this idea that violence is not acceptable. Every time that somebody's called for a civil war, I've said absolutely not. Martial law, all of these types of ideas on how to solve some of the turmoil that we are seeing in America. I've been very, very consistent on that I do not believe in sort of violence or breaking the rules in order to go get what you want politically, even though your guy may have lost. And so what we saw today was very disappointing. I think it hurts the country. I think it hurts conservatives. It hurts people on my team that are questioning the government and how they are operating and running our lives. It was a setback. I think there's no way around that. The sort of lawlessness and the reckless disregard for formality, due process, and the rule of law today was embarrassing. I think that the president largely was condoning it. I just was checking his Twitter feed. Apparently Twitter, actually deleted some of his tweets that were sort of kind of a soft, tacit approval of what we saw happen in the Capitol building today. And so, a lot of disappointment around the aisle, I think all around the country. I mean, I think everybody is largely disgusted by as a result of what they witnessed today. And you can even see here, I'm sort of like stumbling all over my own words here because it's a lot to organize. It's a lot to process real quickly. And so let's just sort of recap this. Let's break it down sort of piece by piece. I woke up this morning. If you're a regular of this channel, you know that we've been talking about lawsuits and election litigation for 2 months, at least since the election. But if you've been with us since before the election, we were talking about the election litigation even before November 3rd. We've been following this stuff for a long time, and we've been trying to identify the one end of the bookend and the other end of the bookend. And so we had the problems that started on November 3rd. We were all trying to identify, when is this stuff going to be over? When are we going to be done dealing with this election litigation so that we can just, inaugurate Joe Biden and move on with this stuff? And the date that we had set in stone was the January 6th date. Of course, today, that's when the votes are counted. And a lot of Trump's own people acknowledged that this day was a very important day. That was sort of their own bookend. And so rather than following along with some of the other expectations that have been set elsewhere everywhere in the media. YouTube said it was done and over on December 8th, and then again on December 14th. And so everybody was making these predictions, and we just said, stop, hold on a minute. Let's let the Trump campaign tell us what their standard is, and then we'll hold them accountable to their own standard. And that standard was today, largely. Now that some of them have even moved the goalpost a little bit to say it doesn't really matter until January 20th, and even beyond that. And we just said, okay, enough already. We read the rule under Section 15 of the U.S. Code, the Electoral Count Act, and it was pretty clear that as soon as the next president is announced on the floor of the joint session in Congress, that's it. That's the ball game. So we were waiting for that to happen today, or at least come to some sort of conclusion. So I was excited about today. I was like, all right, perfect. Finally, right? We're going to get some resolution. We're going to see what the arguments look like. Both sides are going to be able to come out and make their case in front of the American people, lay it all out on the table. Congress can vote. We'll be done with this thing. It was going a little bit differently in my mind today. But we woke up and it started out sort of as we were expecting. I was sitting there with my caffeinated beverage, ready to watch this all unfold, looking forward to some nice constitutional discussion from both sides of the aisle, and to see a little bit of fireworks, see a little bit of activity, see what Mike Pence is going to do, what slate of electors is he going to pick. Is he going to pick Arizona, the certified ones, or the GOP dueling competing electoral votes? We didn't know. And so it was, kind of, there he is. He's opening Arizona. The envelope. Oh, he didn't even talk about the other ones. Oh, my goodness, right? And then and then Ted Cruz objected, Paul Gosar, and then they split up into their joint sessions. Now, as that was happening, we saw this crowd just swelling up from around the Capitol building because Trump had just gotten done speaking right before that. And Trump's speech was a little bit concerning as well. He was saying, basically putting his thumb down on Mike Pence and saying, I've heard, he's not going to do the right thing. We heard from his kids prior to him speaking saying that they're going to be primarying all of these different senators if they don't vote to support him. And it was sort of, a little bit of troubling language. A lot of pressure was coming down to bear on these senators. That being said, they're senators. This is part of their obligation. They have to go and make difficult votes. They have to go and be a part of this process. That's their job. They don't get to skate easily. And all right, that's fine. This is politics. We're all big boys and girls out there. But, the language was a little bit troubling. And then eventually this growing mob essentially was moving towards the Capitol building. And I was watching this unfold on PBS, and I was listening to a reporter who was inside the Capitol building who was reporting from the inside about these people literally breaking the door in. And it started out, with their hanging off the windows, and they're sort of enclosing the building. And then next we know, the door is cracked open. It's not wide open, but it's enough for one human body to squeeze through. And she's in there going, this is crazy. I'm sitting, they're evacuating everybody. And it looks like, what's that movie? Like Angel Has Fallen or Olympus Has Fallen, where some foreign adversary comes in and just swarms the building and takes over the country. It kind of was feeling like that for a little bit. They didn't know who these people were, what was going to be happening. Are they violent? Are they dangerous? And so certainly a scary situation for anybody who's on the ground floor there. Well, the door eventually opened up completely, and a number of these individuals just kind of stormed through the Capitol building, taking pictures, posting, weird images and memes, sitting with their feet up at Nancy Pelosi's desks or whatever that was. And you're just watching this as an American going, this is horrendous behavior, right? This is just disgusting on any level. I can understand being mad at Congress. I'm very mad at Congress. I don't have any love for them in particular. But this idea that they're going to go and interfere with a formal process that was taking place was just abhorrent. I mean, it was just almost shocking. And to see that this was some of the same people whose arguments I have some sympathy for, as we've talked about on this channel, was just very deflating. And so it's not a good situation. And we just saw that continue to unfold. The last I checked, the police have responded. Everybody's back out of the Capitol building. They have said it is secure. And so I'm fully expecting that tomorrow they'll be back with counting of the electoral votes. Now, and how this is going to impact that, I don't know. I think that it may cause some more senators to just flip and say, all right, enough of this stuff already. We're just going to go and just confirm Joe Biden and move quickly through this process in the hopes that this doesn't happen again. It was a messy morning. Let's take a quick little visual recap on what was going on. So as I mentioned, this was at the beginning of the day when you see this sort of crowd out there. A lot of people. Trump was speaking right in this area. A lot of people showed up. A lot of American flags and a lot of, patriotic Americans who support Donald Trump, right? And we can draw some pretty good analogies, I think, between some of the other stuff that we've covered on this channel. If you've been with us for some time, you'll know that we talked a lot about the protests and the police riots and things that were happening around the country back over the summer after George Floyd. Remember, we covered all of that stuff. We covered George Floyd, we covered Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, Jacob Blake, all of them. And there were protests that were happening there. And I'm a criminal defense attorney. I don't have much love for the police in most situations, but I will tell you this, when those protests turned into violence, I disavowed all of them immediately. I said, look, you're ruining the cause. Okay, I am somebody who strongly supports police reform, criminal justice reform. It's my job. We have built a whole law firm around this concept. And when they were turning what I thought was a reasonable protest, when they started burning down Target buildings and lighting tires on fire and killing people, enough already. And their response at that time was, well, no, it's just peaceful protesting. Everybody out here is just peaceful. And, there's a graphic from CNN. We were talking about it in Discord this afternoon, where there's a CNN reporter who's standing in front of a burning used car lot saying, well, it's fiery, but it's mostly peaceful out there. And so there is certainly, I would say, a double standard here on how some of these things are being interpreted. If it's a Trump supportive mob, they're going to be just claiming, seditious and insurrectionist and so on, which there are actually some good arguments for those words today, which we're going to talk about. But the point is, there's a little bit of a double standard in terms of how the media reports this stuff. That being said, as I mentioned, when the protests during the George Floyd era, when those were all turning violent, I had to disavow them because they're breaking the laws, they're breaking order, they're burning people's property down, and they're setting back the criminal justice reform movement, I was saying, by decades. Anybody who watched what happened to George Floyd and then came to the conclusion that, yeah, you know what, maybe there is a problem with how the police operate, we were all sort of in alignment. The whole country was unified that something needed to be done about this stuff. But then when they started torching buildings and wrecking their own cities, everybody just said, you know what, not so much anymore. This defund the police stuff is insane, and we're not going to be on board with that. Disavowed them. Their response was, well, no, look, we're just peaceful protesters, but anybody else who's burning that stuff, they're not part of our protest. They're not a part of us. Well, you don't get to play that game. If you're standing there and there's somebody in your group who's lighting buildings on fire, you got to stop that person. You now have a responsibility, if you're the peaceful protester, to ensure that it remains peaceful. They didn't do that, so you can't distinguish between the two groups. You can't say that there's one bucket of people, half the people in that bucket are lawful and peaceful, the other half are rioters. If they're all in that one bucket, you got to deal with the whole bucket. It's the same concept that we've applied to the police. There are a lot of good police officers out there. I've interviewed some of them, and some of them will say, well, look, I was one good officer in sort of a sea of malfeasance and misconduct, but I knew that internally I was a good police officer. Well, it's the same criticism. You can be a great cop, but if you are a part of a bad institution or a bad bureaucracy or a bad department, you got to do something about that, right? You got to level that up. You can't just say it's them, it's not me. You're a part of that. You're one part of the whole. You got to deal with it. The same rules apply for this Trump stuff. I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter and all over the internet that this wasn't really the Trump people. This was Antifa. This was BLM. These were insurrectionists who were sort of infiltrating the Trump movement in order to go in there and cause havoc. I don't know if that's true or not, right? It looks pretty damn clear to me that all of these people here are Trump supporters. You can't say that all of them are just, infiltration teams from BLM or Antifa or whatever. So if the Trump people are out there and they're seeing misconduct within their own contingency, they've got to do something about it. They didn't here. And so that tarnishes the entire movement. Just like, in my opinion, what we saw with BLM and after the George Floyd stuff, when they started torching cities, you see the Democrats backtracking on that. Don't say defund the police. Reverend Raphael Warnock didn't say, he's not using that phrase. Barack Obama said don't use that phrase because it's bad. You have a couple bad apples and they poison the whole batch. And that's exactly what happened here today. Very, very disappointing because I do think that there were some legitimate things to talk about regarding the election. I would have really liked to have seen some clarity on how we operate our elections, at least from a legal perspective. What is allowed allowed? Can judges do things? Can legislatures do things? Can secretaries of state and election body committees, can they do things? We didn't get a lot of clarity on that, but we did get a lot of angry citizens, which is another thing I've been talking about on this program for some time. I've been saying for the last 2 months, many people have said, well, have sort of been critical of some of the stuff that we talk about here, just because we're talking about some of the issues. I said, if you shut everybody up, if you in the mainstream media tell them that they're all idiots to sit down and shut their mouths, then they're going to be very angry about it. They're going to feel like they have not been heard, and there's going to be a pressure cooker building around the country. And we saw that. It manifested itself today. I'm not condoning it. I'm not excusing it. I'm not trying to justify it or rationalize it away, but I'm just saying this is what's happening. We're seeing, riots and protests on one side. The right is going to just do the same thing. If you can, kneel on flags and sort of protest politically and get active, get in cops' faces, burn buildings down and things like that, the pendulum is going to swing the other way, and now it is. The right is doing it. I've said this many times before as well. If you are going to allow one side to sort of modify, manipulate the election rules, be okay when the other side does it, because they're going to learn how to play that game. They're going to do it themselves. And so we're just seeing an escalation just going on and on and on from both sides of the aisle, which is a bummer. I mean, literally, it's a bummer. We've been trying to dial that back down here and talk about some rational, reasonable, logical things that the country can benefit from. That's been my entire purpose of really dialing in on this election litigation stuff. Some interesting, some not, some a little conspiratorial, some I think are legitimate issues, specifically about the legal issues that we've identified in a number of these different lawsuits. But now, because a large portion of the country feels totally disenfranchised and like they have not been heard, they're going to resort to this type of stuff. I don't condone it. I think it's horrendous. And I really think that they set back this idea that the government is incompetent. I think they sent it back, quite a ways. I think that a lot of people are going to be very disgusted by this across America, regardless of who these individuals turn out to be. In my mind, I've not seen really any evidence that these aren't just regular Trump people who just were having a field day, going right into the Congressional Building and wrecking what should have been an orderly joint session in Congress that gave us some answers about what this election looks like. Very disappointing. We see some more pictures, and when I say it was a huge crowd, I'm not joking. People from all over the country were there. So I'm going to guess that this is not just a bunch of Antifa people. This is a massive amount of people. Look how, it goes back a couple blocks, fills up both sides of the street. Here's another picture from D.C. So this is the area in which Trump was speaking. You can see that's going all the way back down to the Washington Monument. Hundreds of thousands, I would guess, of people just pouring in. And you can see how, a lot of Trump flags, a lot of American flags, Save America March. It looks like a group of Trump people to me, right? We can just say that. We have this. Now, as I was listening and I was watching this stuff sort of boil over, this is what it looked like. There were people marching up towards the Capitol building. If you've ever been to D.C., you've probably stood right here in this area, and they were just marching right up. Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit concerning if you're a cop or you're somebody who's supposed to be protecting that building. Remember, at this very moment when this was happening, there were all the senators and all the House representatives in that building in the joint session on the House floor. I think by this time they had actually broken up into their individual chambers. So the senators were discussing the objections in the Senate chambers to Arizona, and then the House members were also doing the same as this was going on. People literally scaling the walls. So they're taking these barriers and mashing them up against the fence and just scaling right over that wall, which in retrospect, this wall design doesn't look particularly effective. They maybe should have asked Donald Trump about how that border wall was going. Maybe they could have taken some designs from their methodology to stop people from scaling it. It was concerning. Here's some more imagery. Okay, so looks like a couple thousand Capitol Hill police.
You're a fucking traitor! You come here, motherfucker! What's going on? You're a fucking traitor! traitor to
All right, probably should have given you a content profanity warning. I'm listening now through my earpiece. Some of those swear words I didn't hear specifically, but there's a lot of profanity going on. So if you've got any young ones around, we try to keep this show PG-13. This is not a PG-13 kind of day, so there may be some profanity. Probably not from me. Maybe. I don't know yet. The show's just getting started. Let's watch some more clips.
Pepper spray and fucking pussy! Fucking pussy!
Yeah, so totally ridiculous behavior, right? Totally ridiculous. No excuse for that at all. Literally, you can see this cop, macing people right over here. And, they're just barraging their way up. So these are the steps of the Capitol. They're going to work their way up over here and just make it up to the door. From the inside of the Capitol building, it looks like we've got a clip here from a guy named Jim Newell, a blue check mark over on Twitter. Miss Faith pulled this one. Let's see what it is. Those are the protesters breaking in the outside of the door. Window just broke. And at this point in time, that's when I'm listening, I think, on PBS, and the woman who was reporting was very concerned. It's reaching in and they're prying open the doors and troubling stuff. We have another blue check mark says breaking Trump supporters have breached all security barriers and are now actively destroying and occupying the Capitol building. I repeat, the feds have lost control of the Capitol building. The revolution is in progress, not a drill. Videos to follow tonight live on the Blaze TV. And so, there are some questions about the police. How did this happen? First of all, how we have literally spent an ungodly amount of money on national security and self-defense. We have the biggest military, the biggest security apparatus in the world, FBI, CIA, NSA, DOD, CISA, we got them all, right? And they can't protect the Congressional Building when all of our senators and all of our elected officials are in there on one of the most important days in the transitioning of power in our entire country. They can't even protect it from a couple thousand protesters. Insane to me, right? Insane that they couldn't figure that out. So when I say that, people are going to be, well, this is a pretty good example of government incompetence, right? They can't even protect their own building. Now, there were a lot of protesters, no doubt about it, and it's not an excuse, but it just seems to me like they would have had more security. Why was this allowed to happen? I did see another video that was sort of floating around about the police opening gates up and just kind of allowing people through, just sort of giving up and said, all right, well, they're in, let them in, let them have a field day with this. And, I don't know if there's any truth to that. I think that there are arguments to be made on both sides. You could easily say that this really does help. The more chaos, the more of an asshole, sorry about the language, that Donald Trump looks like, the better that is for the country, the better that is for the Biden team and the transition. And I think there's a good argument for that because it's true, right? If the country right now is largely divided because they, half the country thinks that President Trump was, screwed out of this election, and what they can do is now make Trump look like a total a-hole and win back some of those people who were already on that right side, kind of win them back or scoot them towards the middle, make them disavow this stuff, make them disavow the president and move beyond this election kerfuffle. That's in somebody's interest, right? That's a pretty compelling way to unify individuals. Whether this was something that was sort of allowed to happen or encouraged to happen, I've not seen any evidence of that. This looked like it was largely organic. It looked like this was just, very angry Trump supporters who I think there's a good argument were goaded by the president's statements today. The president was out there telling them, we're going to fight. We're going to march to the Capitol. And his son, I think, Junior, was on there also talking about primarying everybody, and holding their feet to the fire and using some vitriolic language. So, to me, there's a couple 100,000 people out there. You get some people with some bad energy. You tell them to march in on the Capitol. It doesn't take much. It takes one person with a bad idea saying we're going to storm it. Boom, the rest is history. We go over to Twitter. We've got some more clips we'll run through. So once they're inside the building, this is what it looks like. Okay. And, it's just totally inappropriate. I mean, there's no way to say it. It's gross behavior. It's unacceptable in American governance. And I totally disavow it. Once it continued to go on, they just didn't stop there. They didn't keep him in the rotunda. They got control of basically the entire building, which is embarrassing from a governmental security standpoint. I said at the beginning of the show that it sounds like the Senate building has now been cleaned up and safe so they can come back. But I mean, how do you know? Because you have people who had access to everything. Here is a protester, one in the chamber, yelling, Trump won the election. This is insane, right? So is this the House? I'm not sure, but they're at the speaker's table or whatever that table is. That might be the Senate. And, literally just sitting there in our congressional building. Some guys taking pictures, a couple people taking pictures. This just happened. Ridiculous. We have Elijah Schaefer says, I am inside Nancy Pelosi's office with thousands of revolutionaries who have stormed the building. To put it into perspective, how quickly staff evacuated. Emails are still on the screen along with a federal alert warning members of the current revolution. So apparently this is Nancy Pelosi's computer, right? She gets a security warning. Looks like she uses Outlook over there, right? It's mind-blowing that our government allowed this type of breach to happen. It's just mind-blowing that they got access to the entire congressional building along with our elected officials, the Speaker of the House, her literal email terminal. Wild. We have a couple other yahoos out there apparently with Trump hats on, and they're taking pictures as well. You got to get those Instagram stories in while you can, multiple of them. This guy's having, some Instagram stories. This guy's probably on the phone with his mom, or this guy's, Instagramming this fellow over here with the horns. Totally ridiculous. I mean, some of these pictures are just, it's a shameful thing that this happened in our country, that that anybody took over one of our buildings. President Trump was out. He said here today, earlier on Twitter, I am asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful. No violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. Respect the law and our great men and women in blue. Thank you. He also says, please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful. Now, as I mentioned, there were some other posts from Donald that are missing now. So when we go over to his Twitter profile, this is what you will see. And let's go there. Sorry about that. There's the right button. So this is Donald Trump, his Twitter account. You can see this tweet is no longer available because it violated the Twitter rules. This tweet is no longer available. It violated the Twitter rules. And so some of those others are still there, but the Twitter is now just deleting his post. Now, one of those posts was something that was sort of a soft endorsement of what we saw today, which I'm not sure if we have that in our slides. Miss Faith, if you have that one, I'm sure somebody else clipped that. If you could add that in the slides, that would be awesome. We may revisit that. But Donald Trump then also posted a video this afternoon. Looks like it got 7.4 million views immediately as a result. Let's see what he had to say in response to this lawlessness. Here he is.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
All right, so if you look at the bottom of that before you switch, so you'll see here it says, this claim of election fraud is disputed, and this tweet can't be replied to, retweeted, or liked due to a risk of violence. And that is probably why those other tweets were ultimately deleted, because they were they sort of mirrored that type of statement, right? Donald Trump comes out, he says, listen, we want peace, but FYI, this election was stolen. I know you're mad. We gotta fight type of tone. He wasn't endorsing some more of this activity, but he was saying, well, the basis, the justification for why you are all so upset and storming the Capitol building, yeah, that's legitimate, is essentially what he was saying. This election is fraudulent. I won in a landslide. Go home and be peaceful. But if you're mad, I get it. So it's kind of like a disavowal / endorsement, which rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and I don't think it was necessarily appropriate. At this juncture in time, I would have preferred just a regular vanilla statement. This is inappropriate. The congressional proceedings need to go on. Everybody go home. The National Guard will be called here in 10 minutes if you don't, right? Something like that, so that we can get back to business. But that is not how Donald Trump operates. So the story here is, or one part of the story is that how many people are going to swing the other direction as a result of that. It was funny today when I first started prepping for the show, I pulled this quote. It said, "Do it. 73% of the GOP backed today's Electoral College challenge." This was a headline over from Rasmussen on Twitter. He said this morning, before all of this shenanigan stuff took place, he said more than 7 in 10 Republicans support efforts by the Republican House and Senate members to challenge the controversial Electoral College votes of several states in a bid to re-elect President Trump. Rasmussen Report survey found that 73% of Republican voters support the challenge to President-elect Joe Biden's Electoral College victory. 6 dozen House members and Senate members plan to challenge the electoral votes for 3 to 6 states, claiming fraud was involved and that the legislatures of those states did not also approve the votes, a United States constitutional requirement. In the latest evidence of the 2020 election split the nation further apart, that the challenge efforts nearly matches the views by Republicans that Biden did not win fairly. 69% of Republicans do not believe that he won fairly. Now, the question is going to be, that was released this morning. What does tomorrow look like? Probably going to be a lot less of a dramatic number. It's probably going to be closer to a third of that is what I would guess. People are going to see this and they're going to be very grossed out, as they should be, because it was a gross thing that happened today. It was interfering with the normal due process functioning of our society, and it was a disappointing thing. In D.C., Mayor Muriel Bowser says that they're going to be instituting a citywide curfew today, starting on January 6th today at 6 p.m. and it's going to go until 6 a.m. on Thursday, January 7th. So everything is going to be locked down tonight during the hours of the curfew. No person other than persons designated by the mayor shall walk, bike, run, loiter, stand, motor, by car, or any other mode of transport upon the street or any other public place within the district. So basically a total lockdown. This curfew imposed by the mayor shall not apply to essential workers, working media, other outlet issued credentials when engaged in essential functions, including travel to and from essential work. So, most of the country is pretty familiar with lockdowns at this point. So they probably have no issues there. Just go, oh yeah, we'll just do that again. Not a big deal. Now, for some time on this program, I've been a little bit critical of some of the language that's been thrown around. We were specifically critical of Jake Tapper and his position that, the senators who were objecting to this stuff were seditious. And I think he called them the Sedition caucus. And he was saying they were traitors and they were, undermining democracy by trying to execute a coup. And I was critical of that. I was saying, how can you possibly be seditious when you're just following the rules, right? It's Section 15. Read through the rules. Senators have the ability to object to the votes that they don't believe were regularly given. And there are a lot of conversations happening about whether votes were regularly given. They have every authority, every right to object to that. Just because they use a provision in the Constitution doesn't make them automatically a traitor, right? It's in the Constitution. So what I wanted to do is dial in on those a little bit. Now that we have people storming and barging into Congress to interrupt the counting process of the electoral votes, let's revisit some of those words. So what I wanted to do is, rather than use the standard sort of definitions that you'll find on Google or in Webster's dictionary, whatever that one's called, let's look at some of the law libraries, the law dictionary. And so we have an amazing young man here who goes by the name of Nick, who is just finishing up law school. He helps us with some of our research projects. And I said, hey, can you do me a favor and do a little bit of research? I want you to go into some of these sort of obscure legal dictionaries and find some different definitions of a coup, of sedition, of treason. What does the law say sort of around the world? Where does this stuff come from? What do the legal dictionaries say about some of this stuff? And so here is what he found and sent me. Now, he took pictures on his computer with his phone and he just texted them over. So I just copied the pictures. They're going to look a little bit grainy and weird, but bear with us. So this first one is the definition of a coup d'etat. And this is from Duheim's Law Dictionary, right? So this is sort of a specialized dictionary that you use in the law. And it says it's French, an often violent, always sudden, and unlawful replacement of an existing government. And so, the question here is, well, was this a coup according to that definition? Yeah, it certainly seemed violent, right? There was one woman who was shot and killed today. I think we have one death. There were other individuals who were seriously injured. There was a lot of property damage, broken windows, a lot of fear, a lot of threats, a lot of hitting, assaults, smacking things around, and so on and so forth. And yeah, I think that prong of this legal test is met. It was violent. It was sudden. But the question becomes, was this an unlawful replacement of an existing government? I don't think so, right? They weren't replacing Congress. They're not going to be passing bills tomorrow. My understanding is everybody's already out of the building. So, is this a coup? Is this something that was endorsed by any particular candidate? No, right? It wasn't. Nobody's intending to replace the government. They just were being, rambunctious idiots out there. And that's all that we had, right? Just sort of, breaking things and storming the Capitol building for some period of time, but not replacing the government. Now, the kind of strange thing that I thought was a testament to America is that we didn't have anybody today, at least from what I saw, trying to capitalize on this movement. Okay, there were a lot of individuals who could have. Okay, any single person who was in Congress, you could have had a Ted Cruz, you could have had a Paul Gosar or Andy Biggs or somebody that you think is sort of on the fringe of this stuff, right? Rep. Mo Brooks, you could have had Tuberville, could have even had Loeffler. Somebody could have stayed behind and said, I'm going to capture this momentum. I'm going to capture this movement. I'm going to stay here and I'm not going to evacuate Congress. And when they come in, I'm going to be chanting with them. I'm going to spearhead this, right? Think about how this might go in a different country. You would have somebody, executing a coup. It would be the leader of a military who is, sort of championing the cause, coming in and claiming power. We didn't see that today, right? Nobody actually took the gavel and said, I'm passing laws and here's my legitimate basis for doing so. It was sort of just a boiled over, angry mob that appeared and disappeared. So whether that's a coup, I just don't think that it meets that definition. Another definition that we were talking about was traitor, treason, right? Are these people traitorous? Are they treasonous? And so we took, Nick found some interesting definitions from some different law libraries. And here, this one comes from the Bouvier Law Dictionary for treason/traitor. We also have a little excerpt from a case called United States versus Hopt, which came out of the Court of Appeals in the Seventh Circuit, decided on 1945, December 20th. So that was right around the coming out of the World War II era. So let's take a look at this definition for treason or traitor: waging war against one's country or aiding an enemy at war against it. Treason is an act of waging war against the state to which one owes an allegiance, or the act of providing aid and comfort, which is some material benefit to an enemy at war against one's country. In the U.S., treason may be committed by a citizen, resident alien, resident of an insular possession, member of the U.S. Armed Forces. Under the treason clauses, conviction requires two witnesses to the same overt act of treason and a voluntary confession in open court. It's a capital offense punished by death or imprisonment. So from this case, United States versus Hopt, it says the Constitution specifically defines the crime of treason as such. Treason against the U.S. shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. So that's it, right? That's the definition. After the definition of treason is given, there is an added provision as to the quantum of proof necessary to convict. It says no person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of two witnesses to the same overt act or on a confession in open court. Right? So does this meet the definition of treason? Levying war against the United States, adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort? I don't think so. I don't think that they are levying war against the United States here. I would liken this more to like a riot or sort of a temporary uprising. But, are these people treasonous? I think according to this statute, not really. They're fighting against the Democrats. They're fighting against sort of, government corruption, against do-nothing senators and things. I think that's probably what is the impetus behind some of this stuff. But they're not necessarily giving aid to an enemy. I don't know who that enemy would be, right? This is people who have a legitimate political grievance in many situations, in many instances, right? You may disagree about that legitimacy, but I think they have a reasonable argument there. The last definition that we were able to pull up comes in the form of sedition. Then we're going to talk about insurrection. So we just covered treason. We covered a coup. Let's talk about sedition. A couple interesting definitions here. The advocacy of violent overthrow of the government. Sedition is the advocacy of insurrection, the argument or promotion of the destruction of the government of the United States or a state within it by force, violence, or assassination. It's a federal crime under the Smith Act, 18 U.S. Code 2385, which preempts state crimes on similar grounds. Sedition was first prosecuted under the Sedition Act of 1789. Although the scope of such prosecution is limited by the First Amendment, both the practice of sedition and membership in a group devoted to sedition are illegal. A different case defines it, says sedition is defined as an agreement, communication, or other preliminary activity aimed at inciting treason or some lesser commotion against public authority, right? So that sounds like we're getting closer there, right? An agreement, communication, preliminary activity aimed at creating commotion against public authority. Yeah, I could see that happened today clearly. Commonwealth versus Goodman. The word sedition means a commotion or the raising of a commotion in a state not amounting to an insurrection, conducting a conduct tending to treason, but without any overt act. So excitement of discontent against the government of the United States or the resistance to lawful authority. And a synonym for the word sedition is treason. So we're sort of getting closer, right? We're sort of in the wheelhouse there, that some of this stuff might have been considered within that category of seditious activity. And I think that fits better than the other ones, at least. So it's getting closer. There is a different section of the U.S. Code under 10 U.S. Code 254 that is talking about insurrection. This came from the Insurrection Act. This was updated in 1956 and sort of modified. Let's talk a little bit about what it says. So under U.S. Code 253, there is a section that is titled Interference with State and Federal Law. Right. So this comes once again from the Insurrection Act. Many people are throwing that word around. This is insurrection. These people are insurrectionists. They're causing an insurrection. Well, let's look at the code. Let's see what the law has to say about that. Here is how it defines it. Now, there's a little bit of a rub here because this is talking a lot about states, the United States being able to do this in states, but doesn't specifically mention D.C. So, keep that in mind. The reason I pulled this statute is because it gives us an idea of how it defines insurrection. It says what the president can do about insurrection, but it tells us what insurrection is. So let's just keep that in mind. It says the president here, by using the militia or armed forces or both, or by any other means, shall take such measures as he considers necessary to suppress in a state any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy if, so he's saying he can do this if both of these are true or one of these are true. So either one or number two. This is the definition, or this is how they are describing what insurrection may or may not be. If it so hinders the execution of the laws of that state and of the United States within the state that any part or class of its people is deprived of a right, privilege, immunity, or protection named in the Constitution and secured by law, and the constituted authorities of the state are unable, fail, or refuse to protect that right, privilege, or immunity, or give that protection. It could also be insurrection if it opposes or obstructs the execution of the laws of the United States or impedes the course of justice under those laws. Boom. There you go, right? Exactly under Section 253, what happened today was obstructing the execution of the laws of the United States, and it was, in fact, impeding the course of justice under those laws. So if you wanted to use the insurrection word, I think you've got a very, very good basis for it in U.S. Code Section 253 under Title 10. So there you go. I think treason, it's a little bit of a, a little bit of a stretch. Sedition, close. Don't think it was a coup at all. Insurrection is probably the right word for what we saw today. Now, under the Insurrection Act, this has been used a number of times where the president will call in the National Guard or military forces in order to come clean some of this stuff up. When I was preparing for the program, I wasn't sure that that was going to be something that was necessary or not. I did clip this from Wikipedia. You can see that this has been used a number of other times. The last 2 times they were used by President H.W. Bush. H.W. Bush in 1989. In 1992, one following Hurricane Hugo when there was some disorder. The other one following the Los Angeles riots out in 1992. So my kind of thought process was, well, if they end up occupying the Congressional Building, if they turn this into Chaz or Chop version 2.0, then you may need to come in there and really clean them out immediately with some force, let's say, behind it. But it doesn't look like that's happening. They've already been cleared out. They're moving out. And so my understanding is they're going to be back to business very, very soon. All right. So what else is going on? Well, we know that people are not going to just rest easy now that this has happened. This is going to, I think, really trigger a lot of people. You're going to see demands for action. People are calling for arrests already. They're calling for investigations. These places have cameras everywhere. It would be surprising to me if they don't identify every single one of those people who was in the Congressional Building. Don't know if they will. Don't know if they're intending to do that or not, but I think they could. So you're going to see sort of a call for repercussions against the people who are involved in today. And I think rightfully so. I think they were trespassing at bare minimum. So it's concerning. But the Democrats in Congress are already pushing back. We see this from Congresswoman Cori Bush, which is kind of funny that we have a Congressperson Bush who is a Democrat over in California. She says, "I believe the Republican members of Congress who have incited this domestic terror attack." A little bit dramatic there, right? Domestic terror attack. I don't know. "Through their attempts to overturn the election must face consequences. They have broken their sacred oath of office. I will be introducing a resolution calling for their expulsion." So there you go, right? Already in Congress, we've got a resolution hit the floor today. Here's what it says on January 5th, filed by Representative Bush. It says, "Directing the Committee on the House Administration and the Committee on the Ethics to investigate and issue a report on whether those members of the House who have sought to overturn the 2020 presidential election have violated their oath of office to uphold the Constitution or the rules of the House of Representatives and should face sanction, including removal from the House of Representatives." So that's been submitted. We'll see where that goes in the House and whether anything comes of that. This is something where normally you'd say, yeah, that's not going to go anywhere, right? This is a political nonsense. But after today, I've gotten calls and text messages from a number of my friends just saying, what the hell is happening right now? People who are not normally plugged into the political world are all reaching out, trying to make sense of this stuff. And they're all disgusted, as they should be, because what happened today was disgusting. And all right, so now that we sort of know, let's just double check and make sure that we've got some updates on what's happening right now, because the news is flying through right now. So on Twitter, we'll see here, it says the officials say the Capitol is secure and one person fatally shot after a pro-Trump mob breached the building and forced the lockdown. So pick imagery of the White House. We've got some people talking about this on NBC. What we need to know: one person was fatally shot. In a televised address, Biden called on Trump to demand an end to this siege. I think siege is a fair word. Trump recorded a message calling for peace and told protesters to go home. The press secretary said the National Guard is on their way. Reuters is reporting as of 2 hours ago, the Capitol building is now secure. U.S. officials say police are driving protesters away from the building, according to a Reuters witness. More updates over here on Reuters. And back over on Twitter, it says Matt Fuller says the sergeant at arms says the Capitol building is secure. The room breaks out in applause. Even though there is no clarity as to the timing, the Congress is committed to resuming the Electoral College vote count as soon as possible. So, it's all going to get back to normal tomorrow, according to Twitter. And Reuters is sort of saying the same. Biden said that it's an insurrection and it borders on sedition. Hey, so Biden's got his definitions down pretty good. I think his definitions match our definitions. That's pretty good. All right, good job, Joe. And so, all right, well, let's take a look at this then. So if we are going to be back to regular business tomorrow, which I expect us to be, then we got to figure out what else is going to be going on with these votes and the counting of the electoral votes. I think that things may change Okay, we had a number of senators saying that they were going to object, a number of House representatives who were saying that they were going to object. But now that the volume is like level 15, maybe their votes change a little bit between tonight and tomorrow morning. Mike Pence today put out a statement that said, I'm not going to be throwing out one slate of votes. So if you're not familiar with the Mike Pence, the Pence card, as everybody was calling it, Mike Pence is the president of the Senate. He's the one who opens the votes. He gets to basically hand the votes that come in from the states to the people who count them. And we watched that happen a couple times today, and he didn't open any competing ballots at all. So Arizona sent 2 slates of electors into Congress. He only opened 1 slate, the ones that were certified. He didn't even mention the other slate, didn't even talk about what the GOP had there. And so this was his letter that he posted today. He put that this is a public release, or a publicly released statement that he sent out today, I think right before he, probably on the way over to the Congressional Building. Trump was speaking. This letter was posted on Twitter. Here's what it says. January 6th, the vice president from Washington wrote, "Today, for the 59th time in our nation's history, Congress will convene in a joint session. Under the Constitution, my duty to serve as a presiding officer. After an election with significant allegations of voting irregularities and numerous instances of officials setting aside state election law, I share the concerns of millions of Americans about the integrity of this election. The American people chose the American president and have every right under the law to demand free and fair elections and a full investigation of electoral misconduct. As a presiding officer," he says, "I will do my duty to ensure that these concerns receive a fair and open hearing in Congress of the United States. Objections will be heard, evidence will be presented, and the elected representatives of the American people will make their decisions." Okay, so he doesn't say anything about throwing out different slates of electors or throwing out the ones. He just basically says, I'm going to open them up. He's going to hear the objections. They can present the evidence. The Congress people then can make their decisions. He goes on, he says, "Our founders created the Electoral College in 1787. It first convened in 1789. With the advent of political parties, the Electoral College was amended in 1804 to provide that electors vote separately for president and vice president. Following a contentious election in 1876 with widespread allegations of fraud and malfeasance, Congress spent a decade establishing rules and procedures to govern the counting of electoral votes and a resolution of any objections. During the 130 years since the EC Act was passed, Congress has, without exception, used these formal procedures to count the electoral votes every 4 years. Given the controversy surrounding this year's elections, some approach this year's quadrennial tradition with great expectation, and others with dismissive disdain. Some believe that as vice president, I should be able to accept or reject electoral votes unilaterally. Others believe electoral votes should never be challenged in a joint session of Congress. After a careful study of our Constitution, our laws, and our history, I believe neither view is correct. The president is the chief executive officer of the federal government under our Constitution, possessing immense power to impact the lives of the American people. The presidency belongs to the American people and to them alone. When disputes concerning a presidential election arise under federal law, it is the people's representatives who review the evidence and resolve disputes through a democratic process. Our founders were deeply skeptical of the concentrations of power and created a republic based on separation of powers and checks and balances under the Constitution of the United States." So, right, there you go. We've been saying that for some amount of time. I was never of the position or of the mindset that Mike Pence was going to just start frisbeeing the votes that he didn't like back in the Congress people's faces. Here you go, Pennsylvania. Here you go, Georgia. Here you go, Arizona. It was never going to happen. He was going to open the votes that were certified, as he did today. And we have a clip of what happened with Arizona that we're going to get to here in a minute. He goes on. He's very clear in this. His statement is not one that is just sort of poo-pooing this. He goes into some history, and I think it's important we spend a little bit of time on it because we're going to be back in session tomorrow with Mike Pence. He goes on, vesting the vice president with unilateral authority to decide presidential contests would be entirely antithetical to that design. As a student of history who loves the Constitution and reveres its framers, I do not believe that the founders of our country intended to invest the vice president with unilateral authority to decide which electoral votes should be counted during the joint session of Congress, and no vice president in American history has ever asserted such authority. That's exactly what we've been talking about here. The idea that vice president of either party, Mike Pence, Kamala Harris, Al Gore, Joe Biden, that they are unilaterally responsible for choosing the president is insane. Why would we give that amount of power to one individual? All the states could vote. We could go through the whole certification process. All those votes could be sent into Congress, and then suddenly they just get to decide whomever they want to be president? Makes no sense. We also see that as a Supreme Court Justice Joseph Bradley wrote following the contentious election of 1876, the powers of the president of the Senate are merely ministerial. He is not invested with any authority for making any investigation outside the joint meeting of the two houses. If any examination at all is to be gone into or any judgment exercised in relation to the votes received, it must be performed and exercised by the two houses. A former U.S. Court of Appeals judge noted something similar. He says, "It is my considered judgment that my oath to support and defend the Constitution constrains me from claiming unilateral authority to determine which electoral votes should be counted and which should not." And you can see it just goes on and on and on. "As a presiding officer, I will ensure that any objections that are supported by both a representative and a senator are given proper consideration and that all the facts supporting those objections are brought before Congress and the American people. Those who suggest that raising objections under the Electoral Count Act is improper and undemocratic ignore more than 130 years of history and fail to acknowledge that Democrats raised objections in Congress each of the last 3 times that a Republican candidate has prevailed." So he's sort of splitting this a little bit, right? He's saying, I don't have the unilateral authority to just toss those votes out, but objections are constitutionally permissible. And I agree with that statement. I mean, I think it's a very reasonable approach. I think it's logical. I think that is actually what the law says about this. There are some Congress people who have basically said that they don't even have the constitutional authority to object. They said, no, we can't object because that's undermining, overthrowing the state's votes. But that's not what the rules say. The rules pretty clearly say that you can object if they're not given regularly. And as long as you have one from the House and one from the Senate and they both agree and they both have floor votes, those votes get thrown out. So I don't know why a lot of these Congress people have been sort of giving away some of their constitutionally delegated power. They say, we can't do that. We don't have the authority to do that. Well, yeah, you do. And as Mike Pence says, you do. And so he's going to give it back over to them to decide on what to do about some of that. He wraps up his letter. He says, 4 years ago, surrounded by my family, I took an oath to support the Constitution. Today, I will assure the American people I will keep the oath to them. When the joint session convenes today, I will do my duty to see it that we open the certificates of the several states. We hear objections raised by the senators and we count the votes. So help me God. Signed, Michael R. Pence, the Vice President of our country currently. So here is a clip from Mike Pence. This was today. This was the Arizona objection. So it's 3 minutes. Let's break this down into a couple different segments. So we've got Mike Pence, who is on the joint session of Congress. This was happening this morning before all the madness took place. And you'll hear, if you listen closely, you're going to hear somebody who's sort of coaching him through the formal process here. So listen, it says, somebody whispers, without objection. Or what did they say? If nothing more, then he says it, and then he goes into his speech. It's kind of humorous when you hear sort of the behind the curtain stuff that they don't want you to hear, and you hear it. So listen closely if you want to. We'll listen for a little bit. We'll pause, and we'll check a couple different clips out together. There are none.
Hearing none. This certificate from Arizona, the parliamentarians advise me, is the only certificate of vote that the state purports to be a return from the state, and that has annexed to it a certificate from an authority of that state purporting to appoint or ascertain electors.
All right, so there you go, right? So that was the big moment that everybody was waiting for, like 10 seconds right there. What happened was Arizona sent 2 competing slates of electors in. One that was a certificate that was certified by the governor and the legislature, the formal votes that went in favor of Joe Biden. And then there was another competing slate that was also sent in by Kelly Ward and the GOP here, where they had sort of their mock signing ceremony where they filled out their own certificates of ascertainment in Donald Trump's name. So both of those were sent into the floor. Mike Pence doesn't even mention the GOP stuff. Doesn't even mention that. Miss Faith just sent me something. Let's take a quick look here. What is this? All right. So, okay. All right. So let's go back to the clip with Mike Pence. Here he is. Okay. So now we have Amy Klobuchar.
Mr. President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Arizona seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Joseph R. Biden Jr. of the state of Delaware received 11 votes for president, and Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 11 votes for vice president.
Are there any objections to counting the certificate of vote of the state of Arizona that the teller has verified appears to be regular in form and authentic?
President, I, Paul Gosar from Arizona.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
I rise for myself and 60 of my colleagues to object to the counting of the electoral ballots from Arizona.
Is the objection in writing and signed by a senator?
Yes, it is.
All right, so there was Mike Pence. Let's take a look. Miss Faith just sent me something. We're trying to figure out if this is true or not. Maybe you can help us decipher this. So she just sent me this clip over from Mike Pence's Twitter. This is him. Some of his statement says, this was his statement he posted earlier. Peaceful protest is the right of every American, but this attack on our Capitol will not be tolerated, and those involved will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The violence and destruction taking place must stop. It must stop now. Anyone involved must respect law enforcement officials and immediately leave the building. And then we're looking here at this headline. Somebody said that this was, or this banner. Somebody said that may have been Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Is that them? Is that Joe and Kamala? Or is that Pence and his wife? Or did he literally just change his Twitter banner to Joe and Kamala? I do not know. Let's see if we can get some information about that. All right, so interesting stuff. Here is Mike Pence again, some more.
An objection presented in writing and signed by both a representative and a senator complies with the law, Chapter 1 of Title 3 of the United States Code. The clerk will report the objection.
Okay, so this was all taking place right before they break here.
The electoral votes of the state of Arizona. We, a member of...
All right, so I don't know why that just broke down right there. We got to figure out our videos here. But what she said is, she said, hey, I'm going to read the objection. The objection is very, very easy to read, very simple. She says, this is the basis for it. They said that the votes were not regularly given. And then it goes back to Mike Pence. Mike Pence says, okay, enough. We're going to break into the joint sessions. And the Congress just fills out. They just sort of pour out of the room. Senate goes back into the Senate chambers. House takes a break. They come back. And then they start going into their debates. We clipped some of the arguments, but literally as Mitch McConnell was going, as Ted Cruz was speaking, I saw Mitch McConnell, Ted Cruz, Chuck Schumer. As this was going on, that's when the mob was sort of encroaching on the building, and then everybody just sort of stopped. Everybody was just like, okay, there was evacuations, and people were, it was melting down literally right in front of our eyes. So it was an interesting afternoon. Now let's see what else we've got. There are some things that we'll be covering tomorrow. We put on our list, and I think we're going to skip some of that stuff, save it for tomorrow when we're back in session. So let's bounce back around on Twitter, see if there's any other updates, and then we'll get into the super chats, and we'll continue to chat for the remainder of the program. Last night we went for 3.5 hours, so we're not going to go super long tonight because there's just too much activity to decipher, but let's poke around on Twitter and see what else is happening. So officials say the Capitol building is secure, one person fatally shot. Members of Congress returned to the Capitol to continue certifying the election results. So are they back in there right now? They're expected to resume tonight, it looks like. So let's listen in, see what ABC has to say about this.
Obviously, as we continue to report, he lost the election to Joe Biden by 7 million votes. And what was most striking, George, is that he did not condemn what he saw in the Capitol today. He said, "We love you. You're very special. It's time to go home." Shortly before that, we saw the President-elect Joe Biden come before the cameras. He called on President Trump to act, and he said these are not protests. This is an insurrection, obviously was the word that he used. It made headlines immediately. He said he was saddened that America has come to such a dark moment. I call on President Trump to go on national TV. He said today is a reminder that our democracy is fragile, but that we will endure. And the Vice President.
Yeah, so, all right, so a couple other statements here. It looks like the U.S. senators are returning to the Senate chambers. Heavy law enforcement details. Take a look at that. I mean, these...
More than Arizona? Are you expecting more?
All right, so there is the FBI rolling in. Looks like Chuck Schumer's walking by.
Schumer, how long do you think the proceedings are going to go tonight? Senator Schumer?
No questions answered. Some more senators. Let's see who else is in here. There's Klobuchar.
Senator Paul.
Rand Paul's there.
Senator Marshall, do you still plan to object tonight?
Tuberville's walking by.
Senator Hawley, do you still plan to object to Pennsylvania?
Hawley's there.
Senator Hawley? Senator Hawley. Hey guys. Hey. Be safe. Thanks. Be safe. Are you expecting objections tonight more than Arizona? Senator, are you expecting more than one objection tonight?
All right, so they're piling back in there. Nancy Pelosi came out with a statement. She says, today, a shameful assault was made on our democracy. It was anointed at the highest level of government. It cannot, however, deter us from our responsibility to validate the election of Joe Biden. To that end, in consultation with Leader Hoyer, Whip Clyburn, and after calls to the Pentagon, the Justice Department, and the VP, we have decided we should proceed tonight at the Capitol once it is cleared for use. Leader Hoyer will be sending out more guidance later today. We also knew this responsibility would take us into the night. The night may still be long, but we are hopeful for a shorter agenda, but our purpose will be accomplished. We knew that we would be a part of history in a positive way today, despite ill-founded objections on the Electoral College vote. We will now be a part of history, and such a shameful picture of our country was put out to the world, instigated at the highest level. Today, January 6th, the Feast of Epiphany. Let us pray that this instigation to violence will provide an epiphany for our country to heal. Members and staff should remain at the Capitol complex until they are notified by by the United States Capitol Police. I look forward to seeing you later this evening during this time of great sadness. So let's see. Rep. John Katko, Congress will reconvene. The attacks today demonstrate that now more than ever we must unify. Breaking Trump supporters. They're forcing a lockdown. Okay, so that was 5 hours ago. So sounds like they are heading back on in to continue the votes. And so we will we'll go through some of these super chats and see what people want to talk about, and then maybe we'll go watch the rest of the Electoral College votes. Oh my goodness, what a day. What's going on? We got our first super chat from Uncivil Law. Good to see you, my friend. Says felony murder charges for literally everyone who stormed the Capitol because of that woman the police shot. Is that a thing? What a mess. So, I mean, you could make that argument. So felony murder is this criminal concept that if you're involved in the commission of a felony and somebody dies in the commission of that felony, then you are responsible for the murder of that. So the analogy that I often use is the bank robbery analogy. Okay, you're the getaway driver on a bank robbery, and you're in the car and you drive the car up, and you don't even go into the bank, but your three buddies who are in the car, they all go in and they kill somebody. Okay, they get back in the car. You don't even know about it. You take off. You leave. Police catch you 5 days later, let's say, and they say, "Hey, you're the driver." Yeah, unfortunately, I was. Okay, well, we're going to charge you with murder. Well, I didn't murder anybody. No, but you did commit a felony in the robbery of that bank, and somebody else that you were sort of a part of a conspiracy with, they killed someone else. Therefore, you get charged with felony murder. So, on civil law is asking, is everybody in that building guilty of felony murder? I would imagine that you'll see some people who would argue that. Good to see you on Civil Law. Go check out his channel, by the way. I did an interview with him, I think a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago. I got to get back on, and we'll do another live stream soon. We got another one from Sharon. Says, okay, so now it's single party rule, packed Supreme Court, new, guaranteed democratic states, censorship, Pravda-style propaganda. Welcome to the new USSR. You know, it is a little bit troubling, right? Last night we were wrapping up our live stream about the Georgia election, and somebody said, don't turn off the stream. Don't stop streaming. The last time you did that on November 3rd, we went to bed thinking Trump was going to win. We woke up, Biden was winning. They said, if you turn off the stream last night, same thing's going to happen. And we thought, no, that can't happen twice. Well, it did. We went to bed last night. Purdue was winning. Loeffler was winning. We woke up this morning. Same story. Ossoff is ahead. Warnock wins. Both confirmed. So I apologize for that, but I needed to get some sleep. All right. I also apologize. Somebody was in Discord today very upset with me for instigating what we saw happen in the Capitol. I apologize for that too, I guess. All right. Thanks, Sharon. We've got some work cut out for us in this country for sure. We have Mommy McMomface, who says, I fear the U.S. is a failed state and we are witnessing the collapse. You know, I'm not sure if the United States is a failed state. I think that we have a little bit of a way to go before you can make that claim. But I think the Republican Party probably is. The Republican Party, I would imagine, is just basically done. We were talking about this before today, and we were saying that the Republicans were sort of fracturing anyways. We had the Ben Sasses and we had the Tom Scotts who are going to be sort of trying to gobble up the moderate mainstreams. Then you have the Republican, or the sort of Trump wing of the Republican Party with the Josh Hawleys, kind of the Rand Pauls, the Ted Cruzes, those individuals who are, you know, a little bit more aggressive, I would say, in their approach to political, you know, momentum. And now, I mean, in light of this, I think the party is so fractured. I'm not even mad about it, right? I mean, the Republicans, all right, Republicans are the Republicans. In my mind, they've been largely Democrat light. Very disgusted with Republicans across the board as a result of that omnibus plan, the defense plan. I don't think they did Trump any favors during his presidency, if at all. You know, they were sort of anti-populist in many of their approaches, which was problematic, I thought. So, you know, good riddance to the Republicans. We'll see what comes out of the ashes there. We've got Wolfgang Deo, who says, no one condones the violence. Violence is bad. However, everyone wants to sit back and watch, quote, politics for getting the boot on our necks. Yeah, you know, we've been talking about this here. We've been saying that this is going to be a pressure cooker. Something like 70 million Americans are just really disappointed with this entire electoral operation. And there are many people who say that's their own damn fault. Stop being sore losers. Maybe they should just accept reality. And, you know, they get censored, they get deplatformed, they get thrown sort of out of their jobs. We're seeing that lawyers who are representing the Trump team, they're getting, you know, kicked out of their firms and stuff. I mean, people are already being violent against this stuff. Today was just the culmination of it. You know, there's high tensions across the board, across all of the different factions. People are angry. Oh, my Twitter just came on. What happened?
Unhinged crowd.
Okay, so let's go back. Twitter just told me they wanted some attention.
We've never been deterred before.
So here's Mitch McConnell. He was on the House floor today.
And will be not deterred today. They tried to disrupt our democracy. They failed. They failed. They failed to attempt to obstruct the Congress. This failed insurrection only underscores how crucial the task before us is for our republic. Our nation was founded precisely so that the free choice of the American people is what shapes our self-government and determines the destiny of our nation. Not fear.
Yeah, but Mitch, a lot of people don't think they got a free choice. They just don't think that. So I know that sounds good and I understand it, but a lot of people don't think that they had a fair shake when they voted. And they also don't think they were heard when they had complaints about how they voted. And when you do that, when you just tell people to sit down and shut up and you don't allow this stuff to really be hashed out in courts, which a lot of people say that it has. I totally disagree with that. I've not seen almost any evidentiary hearings. There was some very limited activity in Arizona. They looked at like 100 ballots and then 1,000 ballots after that. But in most other places around this country, there just really hasn't been, in my mind, a sufficient sort of unveiling of these electoral fraud claims in a way that would satisfy the people who have issues with it. Instead, it's largely been, as I've said before, dismissed on standing, mootness, ripeness, a lot of just made up legal stuff to throw this stuff out of court. Nobody really felt like they had their day to present their evidence, which is why we were a little bit excited about today. Okay, fine. If you got all these claims, Trump, present it in court, present it in Congress. Let's see. Courts don't want to hear it. No problem. You've got Congress on January 6th to come and present your claims. But they didn't do that. They were sort of supporting an angry mob and just really, being over the top with their language and what the repercussions are going to be for these elected officials. Don't condone violence at all, but I can understand the frustration of people who feel like they're not being heard in their country. It's a problem. It's a problem we've been trying to help solve by talking about these issues in a forum that will explore the ideas, that will just say, okay, it's kind of an interesting claim. Let's look at it. What does this lawsuit say? What does the response to that lawsuit say? What does the judge say? But we are just one small little tiny channel here. There's a lot more people who could use an outlet. We've got MJ says, what happens if the New York State legislators pass a bill A416 allowing the government to put contagious people in detention camps? Well, I think the first thing that you would see are a number of different lawsuits. Basically, you can go back to the whole, the World War II Japanese internment lawsuits and things. There was a lot of gross things that happened during that era, and the courts and the laws, I think, have been modified. I don't know what A416 bill is in New York, but I don't know that would have any lawful authority to do any of that type of stuff. But again, who knows, right? A year ago, I wouldn't have thought that they could lock down entire states like California for like 9 months, but they're doing it. So certainly it's something to keep an eye on, but I'm not super concerned that they're going to start rounding people up into camps. They've been saying that my entire life. FEMA, I remember FEMA during the Bush years. FEMA was building all these camps everywhere to round people up. They were carting around, these coffins and stuff because they're going to start executing Americans. That was like 10 years ago, right? Hasn't happened. Don't think it's going to happen, but I understand why some people might. We have the L4G Custom Fabrication says, isn't this the People's Building? It's ours. So you can go take it. I mean, it is the House of Representatives. It's not the house of random Trump supporters wandering around. But I get your point. They should listen to the American people. They don't. They don't even care what the American people have to say. That's why they pass an omnibus spending bill with 2.5 hours notice. They don't care. They don't read it. They don't care. We have MTZ Fam who says, when there is peaceful protest, that's not violence. We have the rights of freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, right to petition the government. Yeah, and I think that a peaceful protest would be protected by all of those things. And, look, you could make the same argument that you make with the rioters that were taking place over the summer. Yeah, look, it might have been 1% of them. It was probably 1% of those Trump supporters who were on the floor or on the grounds of the Capitol building. Maybe 1% of all of the people who were out there actually went into the building or wanted to storm that. But it's enough. It's going to paint the entire movement. Now, every single Trump supporter in this country looks like an idiot because of what this one small segment did. It's not fair. It's just how it goes. It's just how it is. That's why if you are in one of those mobs, if you're protesting peacefully or not, and somebody starts out as a peaceful protest and then becomes an unpeaceful protest, you got to rein that person in, or you got to disavow them. You got to get away from them. You can't condone any of that behavior because it's one bad apple that poisons the batch. It's not okay. Thanks, MTZ fam. Tough day. Tough day. We've got Daisy Seed who says, unfortunately, blame for today is pushed on the people instead of the politicians that have caused the mistrust in the government. Sad day. It is a sad day. There's a lot to be upset about our government. A lot. The right way to deal with it is not by storming the building. Okay, I've made this claim a lot. This is the right way to engage in civic discourse. It is the Federalist Papers. Okay, this is a book of all of the letters that people who were pissed off about the government were sending to the American people back and forth, having open dialogues about it. This one here, Federalist number 33, written on January 3rd, 1788 by Alexander Hamilton. He says here, to the people of the state of New York, and he writes a whole letter. Okay, he's talking about concerning the general power of taxation. 3-page letter published in a pamphlet in a newspaper somewhere, engaging in thought, engaging in dialogue, having a conversation with your fellow citizen. Guess what? People disagreed with that. So somebody else writes a letter back and they have a dialogue. They conversate about it. Okay, we're trying to do that here on this program. We're trying to have conversations and talk about these issues. But to just say, well, we don't need to think about this stuff anymore. We're just going to storm the Capitol building, or we're just going to protest and we're going to burn down a Wendy's and torch a used car lot. That is not something that we want in this country. It's not an expression of democracy. It's not participation in protesting that's covered by the First Amendment. That's all extraneous. That's not what we're envisioning. This is what we're envisioning. It's dialogue, it's thought, it's reason, it's logical thinking. It's not going in there with bullhorns on and taking selfies for your Instagram account on the House floor. It's not okay. Super sad day. We've got Dalton McAfee, who said, I was going to say John McAfee. We've got Dalton McAfee, who says violence not condoned. But what else is there to do when fraud's shown for months and no one listened? Why assume they would listen now, especially after Georgia people are pissed and the government doesn't care? I know. But guess what happened? People are more pissed now. People are going to be more angry. What did this accomplish? What did this achieve? We've got one dead woman, and we've got a number of people who are injured. We've got broken windows. They're going to vote Biden in anyways. Now the only thing that has happened is the entire country is aligned against Donald Trump in a way they haven't been in the last 4 years. They're talking about the 25th Amendment. They're talking about a second round of impeachments. We're going to see what these senators do on the floor tonight, whether they're going to object to the votes. There's a number of people who said they're going to object. Did their opinions change in the last 8 hours? I'm going to guess that maybe they have. So this was not effective. I understand the frustration. I'm as frustrated as hell about it too. I can't stand what the government does on a regular basis. I can't stand it. It's sort of the whole crux of this program. It's watching the watchers. I want to watch the government, the police, the prosecutors, the judges, and the politicians, all of them, because it's sort of rotten in my mind in many ways. In the institutions of power, government likes to consolidate power at the expense of the citizenry. We have to be active and prolific in our repudiation of that ever-encroaching power. We got to be vigilant about it. But when you get violent, when you get disruptive, when you disrupt the due process of what should be taking place in that joint session in this manner, it looks horrendous. And anybody who was like inkling or sort of on the fence and saying, maybe there was some electoral problems, maybe I do have a little bit of distrust in the government, maybe I am a little bit concerned about what Twitter is doing and what Facebook is doing. Donald Trump doesn't seem that dangerous. The Trump people don't seem that dangerous. It's all a bunch of hyperbole and exaggeration. Now they just go, see, we told you so. George Conway has been on Twitter all day saying, see, I told you, he's a psycho. Donald Trump's a psychopath. Look what he's encouraging his people to do. And it's hard to refute that. It's disappointing. It's disappointing. It paints the entire movement. Anybody who questions government, anybody who's been sort of, questioning the swamp is now painted as somebody who wants to break into the congressional joint session and wreck American democracy. It's unfair. It's not accurate. I think it's a misrepresentation through and through. But you served it up to them on a silver platter by barging into the joint session. We have another one from L4G Custom Fabrication says, it was Antifa. Watch the videos. Please make a video when you were proven wrong or I unsub. I'll be watching the watcher. That's fine. I fully expect to lose a lot of subs over this debacle. I hope you don't go, but I understand if you want to. This is a tough day. We have to have a conversation about it. This is my take on how this unfolded. There are other takes. Totally understand that if you don't find yourself in alignment with my take. I get it. I hope you don't unsub because we're going to be talking about a lot of interesting things this next coming year. Would love to see you stick around, but I get it. If you want to bail, I get it. Antifa, I think that there's probably a lot of truth to that. My gut instinct on this is that there were probably a lot of bad actors, a lot of malfeasance taking place in that entire ordeal. How could there not be, right? I mean, how we've seen this going on this entire year. Antifa has been everywhere. Portland, and different places on the West Coast. We've seen riots and buildings burning all across this country all summer. Are we thinking that they didn't show up here and try to instigate or aggravate this situation? Why would they be everywhere in the country but not here in D.C. on this biggest day? And how hard would it be to buy a bunch of Trump flags and have them wear a bunch of MAGA hats and incite some of this violence and protest? I think that's probably true. I think they're probably, without any shadow of a doubt, that they were there. But the numbers, the massive amounts of the crowds that were there, it looked pretty solidly Trump. And I got to be honest, when I was listening on PBS, the reporter who was reporting from inside the Capitol building as they were breaking through, she stopped and asked somebody, and she said, "Hey, what do you want out of this thing?" It sounded like a Trump supporter to me. He was talking about 1776. He was talking about, reclaiming the country and, getting rid of the tyrants and that type of stuff. So either it was, an Antifa person who had good talking points, or it was a legitimate Trump supporter, right? I don't know. I do hope we get some clarity on that. If there is more evidence of Antifa and we can document it or make some comparisons, I'd be happy to talk about it, but it just doesn't feel like that. Feels like Trump was given a big speech. There was 100,000 people there to see Trump. He told them they'll go march on the White House. They did. On the Capitol building. They did. And, that's, I think, that's pretty compelling evidence in my mind. We have Teresa Child, who says, do you think the defund the police movement hurt the police's ability to control the situation? They can't really use tear gas or mace anymore. Yeah, it's a good question. I am very curious about what the police protocol was here. Okay, how do a few thousand people literally break into Congress and get access to our top official emails and their offices? That's insane. Like, that is like literally insane. We have the most robust national security apparatus the world has ever seen. We can't protect one Congress building from a couple thousand protesters. That just doesn't add up to me. It just doesn't pass the sniff test. But maybe they were just overwhelmed. Maybe this was just regular government incompetence, or maybe there were some orders from somebody to say, all right, let them through. I don't know. We see another one from Liberty or Death, who says, as a defense attorney, if you were approved pro hoc vici to represent Elijah Schaffer, what would be his possible defense? So Elijah Schaffer, if I'm not mistaken, that was the guy who he tweeted directly from Nancy Pelosi's desk. I don't think he has any real defense. It's not a good defense. I think the most obvious charge would be trespass. He was on a government building, didn't have permission to be there. He trespassed in. If he this is why you don't post stuff on social media. And here's a couple quick tips in not getting caught for a crime or not getting convicted of a crime. Number one, don't do it. Obviously, that's the first tip. But number two, don't post about it on social media. Okay, anytime you post that you're holding a bag of money that you just robbed from a bank, or post a picture of yourself sitting at Nancy Pelosi's desk, even though you're not supposed to be in that building, pretty bad evidence. Okay, all they're going to do, if they wanted to convict him, is they'll just go subpoena the records from Twitter or Facebook or whatever. They'll see that it was posted from his cell phone that has his IMSI device, his IMSI number in there. They can identify what that number is, just connect it right back to his person, to his account. He owns the phone. He was in possession of the phone. He posted it to his account. It's pretty damning, right? Trespasses all day. He can get convicted of that all day long. It's in alignment with the idea that you don't make admissions about it. Anytime the police ask you about a crime, a lot of people will make an admission. They'll say, yeah, I did it, but, or yes, but. That's not okay. People do a lot in DUI cases. Cop will say, hey, have you had anything to drink? And they'll say, yes, but it was just one. I only had a glass of wine. Yeah, but it was like 3 hours ago. Boom. That's it. It opens the door. The police can run with that. So he's not in a good position. Anybody who is posting these pictures on their Instagrams from within the Congressional Building, maybe they could say that they were on a tour or something like that. It's open to the public. Like there's no defense of it. It's not a good defense. They could try to make a disconnect case, like it wasn't him. Somebody else got his account. It wasn't his cell phone. He wasn't actually in there. But those are not going to go anywhere. We have Adio Data, who says, thanks for your straightforwardness and for bringing some reason and fairness into the debate. You rock, Rob. Sad days. These are, yeah. Let's lift up our hearts. Winky face. Thanks, Adio Data. It is a sad day. It's a bummer. It's just it's a bummer of a day. I think it sets back any sort of, de-swampy, challenging the government. They're just gonna come back and go, see, we told you so. This whole Trump era was a waste, and anybody who supported it should be sort of sidelined. And there's some good reason for it, right? What we saw today was gross. It was not okay in how we want our country to operate. We have Sasha Sisha, who says, I'm a conservative immigrant, and I no longer feel this country has freedom of speech. I feel lost. We still haven't gotten any answers to 2020, 2021. Ridiculous. Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people feel like they've just been told to sit down, shut up. You're not allowed to talk about this stuff. And I think it's probably going to get worse. What we saw today is going to make it worse. I have not seen Donald Trump's tweets get literally deleted, not censored, but deleted. They're gone now. right? I think as soon as he is sort of out of the White House, they're going to, I think you may see him deplatformed. They're going to do everything they can to shut him up. They may just boot him off Twitter, off of Facebook. Be pretty wild if that happens. An ex-president who has been deplatformed. So I would brace yourself for some of that. We have Sasha Shisa who says, what's the 25th Amendment? Kyle Becker's tweet. So Sasha, this is the 25th Amendment is the provision that says that the vice president can invoke the help of the rest of the presidential cabinet and basically declare that the president is not fit for office. So you would use this. I think they regularly will use it in like when they have operations and things. So I think George Bush had an operation and Cheney was temporarily the president for like 3 hours because George Bush was under anesthesia, and then they pulled that back, and so they reinstated George Bush. So it's basically this idea that you can remove the sitting president, replace them with the vice president if you get all of the cabinet members on board. There's a formal process to it, but people are now saying, yeah, Mike Pence should talk to the other cabinet members, invoke the 25th, throw Donald Trump out of office, and then kind of swoop in there and take control. We have Ryan Renard who says, Pence is dead to me, no backbone. Yeah, there are a lot of people who feel that way. Okay, I don't think that Mike Pence had particularly much of an option here, sort of reading through the lawsuits and the law. But I understand your perspective on it. There is a bit of an argument for it. Ted Cruz laid this argument out also, right? If the vice president is just ministerial, if he's just there, a figurehead, well, then what? Then who does? Who does decide that when there are competing slates of electors? I think Mike Pence could have gone that route. I don't support him doing that. I'm glad that he sort of did what he did, but I understand your point, Ryan. We have Vinny the Cat who says, what is the process for Pence to invoke the complete 25th Amendment to become president? Can it be done quickly? Who else needs to agree? So I don't have the statute up in front of me, but it is just kind of like I described. It's the cabinet. So I think he goes around, he talks to the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Treasury, kind of everybody in the presidential cabinet. I think there's 11 or 12 seats in there. And with a majority vote, they get to say, all right, yeah, we've been around the president. We know this guy's off the rocker. We're going to invoke it. And I think it can happen quickly, but I don't have the specifics on that there, Vinny. I don't think it's a serious thing happening right now, but if it is, we'll revisit the 25th Amendment. Another one from Sabo says, so the Democrats cheat openly and there is substantial evidence to support the claim. What do you propose as the remedy? It's a good question. I mean, I've been saying this for some time here. I think the answer is a reconstitution of local politics in many senses. So it would be the focus on electoral, I would say, adjustments happen locally. And this is something that takes years in order to work its way up to the federal level. So if you're in Georgia and you're outraged about this stuff, well, there are a couple things you need to do, right? Some people need to run for office. The Secretary of State has to go. The governor probably has to go. You have to make challenges. There's Stacey Abrams there in Georgia. The Republicans need somebody else who's aggressive as hell and pushing for voter registrations and trying to seize the rules of the election in their favor. The Democrats did that this last season. We've talked about this. Priorities USA funded a bunch of lawsuits from the Retired People's Association. They were filing lawsuits all around the country to change the rules to serve their electoral interests. They did it. They succeeded. They won. The Republicans have no response to that. They've been caught flat-footed. They don't have anybody, who they have sort of weak-ass candidates, terrible candidates, Loeffler and Perdue. Nobody was excited about them. A bunch of rich people who were involved in, stock swindles and things like that. It's like, those are not the ideal candidates. Same here in Arizona. Martha McSally, everybody knew she was a dead candidate. Not going to ever win, right? Terrible candidate. Like, why are they doing that? Why are the McConnells not making any progress on a $2,000 stimulus bill versus a $600 stimulus bill? Like, they're literally thumbing their nose at their own constituency. Donald Trump, for a lot of time, has been the only, I think, saving grace of the GOP. The GOP was dead in 2016 anyways. Nobody voted for them. Ted Cruz ran, Rand Paul ran, a lot of, 19 Republicans ran in 2016. Nobody liked them. They liked Donald Trump. But the Republican Party is still trying to be the old Republican Party. And they're losing their asses over it. because nobody wants that. Nobody wants the Grahams, the Romneys, the McCain-ish type of Republican Party, the McConnells. Nobody wants that stuff anymore. So the Republican Party has to reconstitute itself. It needs to be, I would say, a younger party, one that's less, over the top with some of the social, cultural issues. I would like to see more of a libertarian bend in sort of the Republican movement. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're just going to double down on this. They're going to say, see, we told you so. Trump was an aberration, and they're going to swing right back into their traditional ways. It's going to be McConnell as the minority leader. It's just it's the old guard, the new guard, the old guard. It's the same. It's really the same side, right? I mean, think about it. Break this down. So let's go back to Ronald Reagan. We have Ronald Reagan for 2 terms. George Bush, then his vice president, gets elected. He only has a one term. Okay, George Bush is there. 1 term, gets defeated by Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton has 2 terms. Bill Clinton is married to Hillary Clinton, who is sort of spearheading a lot of, healthcare reform and all of that stuff, right? She's padding her resume because she's going to run for senator soon. Bill Clinton's in office for 2 years. Runs again. It goes from George Bush dad to George Bush son, right? So we go from one Bush to another Bush with an 8-year break. Soon as George Bush has his 2 terms, we get an Obama. After Obama's done, and Hillary Clinton is the Secretary of State for Obama, we go back to the Clintons. Now Clinton runs again. Okay, now once Clinton loses in a total aberration, nobody thought that was going to happen. Guess what happens? Joe Biden wins, who was Barack Obama's vice president. We go right back to Barack Obama. Okay, so we've had over the last, 2 or 3 decades, just the same handful of people in power, all part of the same administrations. So it's just going to go right back to that. It'll be Biden. Then we're probably going to see some more of the same Republican faces that we've always been seeing for the foreseeable future. And they're going to lose. People are tired of it. People don't want this stuff anymore. At least from my perspective. Maybe the country does. Maybe they're happy with Joe Biden. They're going to think it's the third term of Barack Obama. Maybe it's apparently most people are interested in that. I'm not. And if the Republicans try to go back to that old way of doing business, I'm just not that interested in it. Honestly, I'm not. I'm not interested in getting taxed to death, spending $2.4 trillion that nobody reads, nobody cares about, and then stiffing the American people as well. So they're gonna lock us down, take a bunch of money from us, impose all of these ridiculous life limitations. Don't go out after this time. Only 6 people in your home. And basically, literally lock you down in your life. They're going to take and take and take and take from you. And then when you need some help back, when the American people need something back, nah, we're good. We're going to send it to Nepal, Sudan, and all these different places. I don't even care about that. If that's the Republican Party, good luck, boys and girls. Not interested. So I would be more interested in getting involved locally and seeing what we can do to maybe secure the elections or straighten things up in our home states and our own local elections, and then use that as a jumping off tool to encourage some meaningful national reform. Thanks, Sabo. We've got Isaac Castillo, who said, we have had months, plural months, riots, protests, civil unrest, loss of life, property. How many times has the Insurrection Act been acted this last year? Yeah, I mean, it could have, right? A lot of riots, a lot of protests, a lot of burnings of buildings, all sorts of stuff. Have not seen the Insurrection Act at all used this year. I think the last time it was used was from that slide, long time ago. I think the last one was in 1992 with the Los Angeles riots. So, it's not something that you should throw around. Look, is this, I think, technically an insurrection by definition? Yeah. But they're already out of the building. They're already voting again. Like I said, this was a bunch of angry people who were just roaming in there and probably having fun, having a good time. And that's all it is, right? They're back to business. Disgusting. I don't approve of it. I don't condone it. I'm not trying to excuse it. But it's not the melting down of the country. Country's right back to business, all in one day. We have Michael Fletcher, who says, Robert, 2 separate images of the same chap. One is rumored to be a BLM protest. One is today. 2 different face paintings, same tattoos, Please cover, please. Okay, so here we are. We're covering it. So 524 posted today. Looks like we got this fella over here, according to Michael Fletcher, says this was at a BLM rally, which looks right? F the police over here in a sign. So we got some evidence of that. Kind of looks like the same outfit for sure, right? We got the horns, similar face painting, similar face, goatee. Yeah, that looks like the same guy to me. I would say confidently that's the same guy. We've got, you can see a little bit of a tattoo over here, but that's covered up. Nope, there it is. Yeah, you can see some of the same tattoo markings. Looks like bricks on his arm. He's got some interesting other symbols. So, what is he doing at a BLM protest? Well, he could be there supporting BLM, or he could be there supporting the opposite end of BLM, right? The BLM protests, there were a lot of BLM protesters that were sort of being counter-protested by the other side, right? The support the police, defend the blue, the blue line people. Or this guy could just be a professional agitator, right? There are those people that just like to go where the action is. They like to be where it is. He likes to put on his suit, take his shirt off, and roam around and get accolades. Hey, that's a cool hat. What are you here for, right? And people just like to be where the energy is. It could just be as simple as that. Could be a paid agitator. Could easily be Antifa or BLM or any one of those organizations. I don't know. But from what we can see thus far, it looks like it's a lot of red over there, a lot of MAGA hats, a lot of Trump. Some of it looks kind of perfect, right? Like if you wanted to impugn the Trump people, it'd be very easy to do that. All you need to do is get a hat, get a sweater, get an American flag, and that's it. Now you're a Trump supporter, right? Nobody has identified these individuals or seen what their names are, what their backgrounds are. But I would hope that we will learn more about that. I'm going to presume that some of these people are going to be charged, and maybe we'll get some information about it. If we do, then I will talk about it. Thanks for that, Michael. Another one from Shy Samuel, who says, Robert, look at this proof by Lynn Wood that shows it's Antifa guys. Look what they wear and also tattoos. So intel that someone named Spencer Sunshine infiltrated is creating chaos. Antifa is live streaming, says it all. So that was that picture that we just looked at. It's Antifa. The police, the quote, police is their people making a show to steal the day. You fell to it. I'll acknowledge that, Shay. All I'm looking at is pictures. It's all the evidence that I've got. And on the face of it, it looks like Trump people. But as I said, it's very easy to become a quote Trump person. Whether they are or not, I don't know. We have Sharon Quidney who says, all this outrage from the Dems over today. Where was the outrage over BLM, Antifa, burning of cities, murder, and mayhem? Yeah, it's a good point. And I mentioned that at the outset of the show, Sharon, is that there's a massive double standard here. And we just got to get used to that. Anytime anybody on the right does something remotely wrong, they're going to get blown up and totally blown out of proportion. Now, in this case, I think this one was rightfully called out. This was a concerning day. It was problematic. There was a joint session literally going on. They wrecked it. They ruined it. We were all excited for today to finally get some clarity on a very important issue to the entirety of the country. They ruined that. So, they're going to get scolded for that, as they should. But it is a double standard. The other image that we were sharing on Discord was the one of there was a CNN reporter literally standing in front of a burning car lot with flames like 30 feet in the sky, just saying, it's mostly peaceful around here. A little bit of fire back there, but not too bad. And you say, wait a minute. You have to understand anything that you're watching, there is a narrative there behind it. And they are going to be, they're trying to compel you to go one way or the other to kind of fall into their narrative. I was watching PBS all day today, and it was just like, mind numbing. Every time somebody came on, it was the same talking points, one after the other. Well, Trump and Trump and Trump and Trump and Trump. And it's like, can we have some original conversation on this channel? But no, you can't. Bonnie Speck says, representative of Rhode Island called them domestic terrorists today. Legally speaking, are they? So, yeah, maybe, I guess you could call them terrorists. People were terrorized. I was listening to the PBS news anchor, sort of being terrorized. She was very concerned. So terrorists, the definition, I don't have the legal definition from those dictionaries that we covered, but right, it's using violence or threats of violence in order to further political ends. They kind of fit that definition. We have another one from Teresa Child who says, didn't see the tweets from Trump, but I do have a take on the video. If Trump completely disavows these people and they feel like their leader turned on them, might that make the situation worse? I could see that, Teresa. I think that there's probably some argument for that. If they do feel abandoned and like they're sort of alone in the wilderness, people can kind of do anything. But what they were doing was pretty bad. And, now that they're cleared out, I think that's a good thing. I would have liked to seen, just a little bit, well, a lot of it more from Trump. I would have liked to have him just said, listen, I understand you're upset, but this is totally unacceptable. Not talk about the election anymore, so we can continue to talk about the election after you vacate the premises. We can have a reasonable conversation about this. We were trying to do that on the House floor today, but we couldn't do it. You guys have to leave immediately. Otherwise, something's coming, right? National Guard's coming. Insurrection Act is coming. We sort of skipped over the Insurrection Act, but there is before you can use the Insurrection Act, you have to make a public claim. You have to tell the group to disperse. The president could have done that. He could have said, you disperse, otherwise I'm going to invoke the Insurrection Act. But I got to be honest, I think that Trump probably got a little bit of enjoyment out of it today. I mean, he kind of seemed that way. He posted a tweet on Twitter. Let's take a look, see if Miss Faith, she gave us a screenshot of it, but I have to open it. Okay, let me see if I can do that. All right, so I can't do that right now, but there is a screenshot of Trump's tweet. He says, there are things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from the great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever. So let me see if I can get this open in a new window. Yes, here it is. All right. So this is what he posted. This is the tweet that was deleted. These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever. So that is, this is like, I told you so. I told you guys this was going to happen. It should have happened. This is what happens. You're welcome. That's not the right message for what we saw today. We have another one from Rich Lawrence who says, hey, Rob, lots of hysteria today from the mainstream media. Where was all the outrage with looting, BLM, Antifa, burning down buildings, cops and innocent people dying? Yeah, there wasn't any, right? There wasn't any. They were making excuses around the clock for it. Around the clock. And that was from a guy who was pretty sympathetic with the original movement, right? I was trying to figure out, well, what is this BLM thing? What are they trying to accomplish? Do they have any serious proposals that we can analyze? I was looking to analyze something. Okay, listen, we understand that BLM, you want some justice reform. So do I. I'm a criminal lawyer. I've been practicing in this space for 6 years. I know a little bit about it, okay? I have a whole law firm built around it. What's your serious proposal for justice reform? Do you have one? I could never find one. I mean, I've looked, nothing. That's all defund the police and broad vagaries that nobody can really do anything with. And they were burning stuff down. People were getting shot and killed. The mainstream media largely was excusing it, I think, because they preferred the chaos. I think the chaos looked bad for the Trump administration, who was kind of letting this stuff go on. People were getting mad at him for saying, hey, you're a law and order guy. Why are our cities burning down around the country? So I think there was some political wherewithal for them to continue that line of thinking. And we see it out of Portland, right? Ted Wheeler, who is the mayor of Portland, before the election was letting the Portland nonsense go on and on and on and on. Well, after Joe Biden looks like he's going to win the presidency, now Ted Wheeler is saying he's going to crack down on the lawlessness in Portland. Well, what changed? It's been going on for months and months and months. Well, what changed is the election happened. Donald Trump's on his way out. Joe Biden's coming in. We don't need that sort of angered cauldron of boiling resentment from citizens around the country. So it's a political thing. Of course it is. We have Cable Box. Congress is going to resume shortly this evening. Thanks, Cable Box. We have another one from Rich Lawrence says, Rob, can this delay benefit a contingent election? So it's a good question. I thought originally maybe that might be something that they were going to try to seize on. I really don't think it is. I think it's going to hurt them more than it helps them. Tactically, the concept may have been that they wanted to delay this stuff. If they continue to delay and delay and delay, then they're going to get to a January 20th, Nancy Pelosi would become the president. She's the House of Representatives. She's got reselected as the chairwoman. So she would be the president. So they would need to do something. Otherwise, she may be worse than Joe Biden, right? So no, If they don't have a result, that doesn't automatically mean we have a contingent election. The threshold issue there is dropping Joe Biden under the 270 number of electoral votes. That's what would trigger the contingent election. Since we know that Mike Pence is not going to throw out duly certified votes, the only mechanism to get Joe Biden under the 270 would be then to object to the votes on the floors, have floor votes, send those back to the tellers who would give those objections to Mike Pence. He would throw those votes out, not count them, just move on to the other states. Ultimately, the final tally would be under 270. That is what would trigger the contingent election, not a delay. So you still have to go through the formal process. Humongous super chat. Whoa. This is from Friedman Google. He says here, in 1995, 23 states had just passed a law putting term limits on their members of Congress. The Supreme Court jumped in and said that only a constitution can limit terms of Congress for its members. Apparently, the Supreme Court sticks their nose into the state's business whenever it suits it. Yeah. First of all, Friedman, that is an incredibly generous super chat. Thank you very much for that. Very much appreciated. Your point here, I think, is well taken. The Supreme Court here, you're saying that they, in 1995, I'm not familiar with this, but he said 23 states had passed a law putting term limits on their members. Supreme Court jumped in, got rid of that in 1995. But now the Supreme Court, they just don't want to interfere with what states do. And I think he's specifically talking about the Texas versus Pennsylvania lawsuit. Texas was suing Pennsylvania. Supreme Court said, no, Texas, you don't have any standing to address that underlying the issues in Pennsylvania. If Pennsylvania wants to run their elections however they want, if the Supreme Court there changes the rules, if the legislature said we want to do it this way, but the Supreme Court says we want to do it that way, well, the Supreme Court can win. Nobody cares at all. Literally, like that's what happened. It went up to the Supreme Court here in the U.S., and it was a 4-4 decision because John Roberts joined the liberals, sent that back down. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court, their ruling standed. It stood. So, I mean, you're right? The standing issue, the mootness issue, all of these sort of predetermination excuses for throwing lawsuits out, you can kind of just make them up and do whatever you want. As you saw in 1995, the Supreme Court stepped in and interfered with what the states are doing. 2020, though, not so much. Once again, Friedman Google, thanks again for that. I really do appreciate it. Sabo Abba says, what good is the rule of law if one party follows it and the other one doesn't? Yep. We're going to see a lot more of that. Get ready for it, right? The Supreme Court, I just got done answering Friedman's question. Supreme Court said states can do whatever they want, really. One state has no business in another state. So why wouldn't Pennsylvania just continue to manipulate the rules in a way that serves them? I think they would. I think they will. I think we're going to see a lot more of it. I think things are probably going to get a little bit worse before they get better. Beth Coddington says, hello, Robert, Faith, and Ma. I was greatly saddened by the events today. That being said, the hypocrisy of the mayors and governors of the states that let Antifa and BLM run rampant is glaring. Yeah. I would agree with that. You got to remember, though, it's all political stuff. Every time something bad happens to the other team, they're going to run with it. It happens on both sides of the aisle. But there was, this is kind of a glaring compare and contrast. You can easily look at what happened over the summer, and we covered almost all of it on this channel. Talked a lot about it. And there was excuse after excuse after excuse for that behavior, which a lot of that protest stuff I was pretty sympathetic with until it went beyond the pale. Same situation here. Thanks, Beth. Don't be too sad. Everything's going to be okay. We have Teresa Child says, it's a shame this happened because Cruz was great. Few people will hear him talk about door number 3, which is the door I've always been most interested in. Yes. Well, Teresa, we'll play that tomorrow, I think. I don't think I have that clip today. I was in the middle of clipping it as the chaos was ensuing. But yeah, he did give a good point. Ted Cruz was talking about creating a commission. I think he wanted 5 bipartisan senators, 5 House members, 5 Supreme Court justices to investigate the election and then issue a ruling on it. Sort of like what they did, I think, in the 1876 election, where they did exactly that. He was saying, listen, we have, as a Congress, as a legislative body, we have subpoena power. We can go and investigate some of these things. And he made a pretty compelling case for that. But you're right. Nobody's going to hear that. And he's probably not going to be able to make that speech again. we did clip it or in the process of clipping it, so we'll play that tomorrow and revisit that. We have SSW Lamb who says, I didn't think Pence would throw votes out, but he should at least be willing to send any irregular ones back to the states for possible correction. Yes. So that was sort of, one of the other possibilities. Not that he's not going to pick which ones to choose, but he wasn't going to pick any of them. Okay. So he wasn't going to accept one or the other. He was just going to say, no, I've got two of these and I can't decide which one of these to pick. So therefore send those back to the state legislature to decide. The problem with that then would be that every single time you have a new president, every single state would have competing electors, right? Every single one would do it. At least the ones that lost by a close enough margin. So every single 4 years, you'd have that going on. You would have the votes, they would get certified, they'd land on the vice president's desk, he would reject all of them, send it back to the state legislatures, then the legislatures would then certify the election. So the speaker or the Senate president then would have some power because he could say, okay, well, I know that legislature is Republican, so I'm just going to send those back. So like in Arizona, for example, it'd be a great case to do that. If he sent Arizona's both back, what would happen is Arizona still by a small margin has a Republican legislature. So Mike Pence could just say, nope, okay, I'm not going to accept any certificates out of this state, go back, legislature, figure it out. So he could kind of circumvent the vote in that way. Rather than accepting the one that was certified by the governor, he could send it back to the legislature knowing that it's a Republican legislature and they'll certify the election. So you could sort of circumvent the original vote, which would be problematic. But I understand your point. Thanks, SSW Lamb. Good to see you, my friend. We have Christopher Muriel, who says, any word from John Ratcliffe in that report? Was I wrong to suspect a major revelation today? So, Christopher, no, I have not heard anything about that. It was originally set for, I think, December 18th. He's talking about the John Ratcliffe, the Director of National Intelligence. In 2018, Trump issued an executive order that was going to mandated that all of the different security agencies would do an election audit, do a report on what happened in the last election, specifically related to foreign interference. And there was a report that was supposed to be due from all of those different agencies back by December 18th, but for whatever reason, that got delayed. Many people were suspecting that was going to be delayed until today, right? Because they needed some more time. Well, December 18th to January 6th, it's like 3 weeks, plenty of time. Maybe they'll have some information and they'll want to reveal it today, but we didn't get there. I haven't seen it that it's available. I haven't seen any news about it being postponed or anything like that, but we didn't get to see anything today because of what happened. We have Rich Lawrence. Is this the last recourse scenario? They certify Biden. January 18th, a new bombshell drops proving Trump actually won. Is it too late? Yes, it is, Rich. I think it is. I think that on January 6th, when you read the rules under Section 15, it says that as soon as the president of the Senate, in this case Mike Pence, as soon as he gets the final tally and he reads into the record, there's a specific statement he needs to read. As soon as he does that, that's it. It goes in the journal. It's recorded. It's game over. Okay, he is the official president. He'll be transitioning in and inaugurated on the 20th. So I do think it's too late. The only mechanism in place at that point in time to remove a sitting president would be an impeachment, right? So the Congress would have to impeach them, or the president himself would have to resign. I don't think there's any other mechanism to change it after the fact. Okay, you don't get to like say March and say, well, now we know officially that Trump won. Doesn't matter. Okay, you don't just swap out the president, President Biden, and swap back in President Trump. Doesn't work like that. It's already certified. All of the time for the objections have now passed. They've come and passed. So today was the big day, which is why we were very excited about it. We have another one. Helen Alera says, after the disorder today, will Congress shortcut the deliberation and be done upholding Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of our Constitution? Yes. Will Congress shortcut their deliberation? Probably. Yeah, probably. Let's take a look and see what's going on over on Twitter. See where they're at the moment. So back over here, we've got they return. See any updates. So same stuff. All right. So not too much to report over there. Yeah. I mean, I think they will probably cut short their deliberation. These people are like 100 years old. So, it's already way past their bedtime over there. Probably getting a little ornery. So those debates I do not think are going to be super rambunctious. We have SSW Lamb says, Rob, it's disappointing that the Capitol was stormed in wrong, and I fear less senators will join the vote objections. I think you're right. I think a lot of them are going to be rattled by this. So I'm not expecting anybody who was sort of on the fence to join. I think this is probably going to solidify just moving past this thing as quickly as possible. Another one from Chill Bill says, I agree in part, but the government isn't listening. Judicial is largely responsible, in my opinion. What are we supposed to do? Also, what violence was there? Well, Chill Bill, somebody did get shot and killed. So there was a video on Twitter of a woman who was just sort of standing in the stairway and somebody fired a gun through a building. Don't know if it was the police. Don't know if it was an active shooter. There were people saying it was an active shooter. There were cops sort of on her side of the door. She got hit in the neck. She fell down. She was bleeding out. They hauled her out. She's dead, right? That's violence right there. Breaking windows in, trespassing. You saw a lot of the physical alterations back and forth with the cops. That's all violence in my mind. I understand the frustration here. I think the appropriate response is to organize locally, protest peacefully, engage in dialogue, start a group, start a conversation group where you talk politics, where you raise money, support candidates. It's getting a little bit more involved locally. A lot of people today are very outraged. They're very upset about this stuff, and they have no involvement in politics at all. Like, they don't do anything about it. They don't talk about it. They don't think about it. They don't read about it. They don't speak about it. And I would encourage more people to do that. I understand it's a difficult thing to do, but if you want to see change in the world, you got to be that change. You got to go do it. You can't just kind of sit in your chair, scream at the TV, and expect the world to just fall into place. This is the time for people to get involved in the right way. Like I said, it's about thinking things through. It's about the Federalist Papers. It's about writing documents and exchanging ideas in a way that's useful and productive. What we saw today was not useful. It was not productive. So it was ineffective, and it was a sad day. We have another one from, I can't even come close to pronouncing that name. I apologize. He says, I think this is just the beginning. The situation was not created by the people in the streets. It was created by the politicians. Yeah, the politicians are not exempt from any of this stuff. They are the ones who are controlling the narratives. They know what they're doing. And, this whole thing today kind of reminded me of an episode of House of Cards. I could easily see some of these people sort of coordinating this. All right, let's do this. Let's open the gate. Let's let them come in. Let's milk this sucker for all it's worth. I could see it happening. I don't have any evidence of it, but it's just a horrendous thought experiment. Moving on, we've got Sharon who says, I'm not leaving, although today's events and some of the chat comments are making me sick to my stomach. Well, Sharon, I know. It's one of those days. People who are sort of aligned with this idea of less government, more personal responsibility, more freedom. They saw Trump as sort of a mechanism to help them get that because of his sort of, wanting to drain the swamp and sort of change the standard political discourse into something different. He wanted to change it in a way that was more populist, more power to the people. This is a rough day for that group. It's rough. Okay, everybody's slam dunking the ball. Everybody's, high-fiving each other. See, we told you so. Trump's an idiot, and you people are idiots and conspiracy theorists, and everything that you say and do. Are you happy with yourselves? Look what you've done. How could you do this to our country? A lot of that. It's hyperventilating, just going bananas out there, having a field day with it. So that's okay. Let them have fun. Let them dunk on the comments. Let them go crazy. It's all right. Celebrate away. Okay. 4 years ago when Trump won, it was the same thing. And the pendulum's going to swing the other way as well. This is going to be a short-lived victory. Joe Biden, in my mind, is not America's savior, okay? And anybody who is out there saying he's going to save the country is like, what? You can make that argument for somebody like Obama, somebody new and with new ideas and fresh energy in Washington. Joe Biden's been around for 37 years, okay? I don't even know that he knows where he is most of the time. And so he is just another figurehead who's a part of the mainstream power structure. I'm not particularly concerned that he's going to just, decimate the country. There's too much money to be made. It's the old guard back in power. It's going to be, mostly the same as it was during Obama's time. Something that was pretty stable, kind of bland, very vanilla. Nothing particularly consequential came out of the Obama administration in my mind. It was Obamacare, had some, very minor foreign entanglements here and there. But if you look back on those years, what happened, right? It was kind of pretty bland and vanilla. Well, Joe Biden is the same type of candidate who's going to be in office. So it can feel bad, and it can feel like, oh, we kind of lost, and like our feelings are hurt, but it's all right. This is going to be short-lived. People are going to see how this works, and there's going to be a pretty big response. I think the pendulum will be swinging back the other way probably soon, probably in a short 2 years, 4 years, certainly. We'll have another one from Everjoe. Says there is a video of the police letting them in and open the gates to the protesters on D.C. Drano on Instagram. All right, so it looks like Miss Faith pulled this one up. Let's take a look.
Police are squabbling with protesters. Oh, there we go. And they just breached the Capitol again.
All right, so let's watch that one more time.
Police are squabbling with protesters. Oh, there we go. And they just breached the Capitol again.
All right, so interesting. Yeah, right? That was the video that I saw. You saw the clothes that the officers were wearing said Capitol Police. They opened the gates. People were just, rolling through. The one thing on that, video, you got to be very careful with video these days. I've made the mistake in the past of saying, oh, that looks pretty bad to me. And there's a very perfectly reasonable explanation on that. So you always like to kind of pick both sides of that. He said there at the end of the video, looks like they're breaching the Capitol again. So the police maybe have just said, all right, enough already, right? They're already inside. Let them in. They got a stand down order. They said, all right, let them in so that they can just get it out of their system, and then we'll deal with it later. I could see that happening. But at the same time, it's the Capitol building, folks, right? This isn't a mall. Here in Arizona, in Fashion Square, something similar like that happened. They went in there and they just kind of let them go for a while. This is the Capitol building. You don't let that stuff happen, right? This should be the most secure building in the entire country, maybe save the White House. So why were the police just letting them in? Did somebody give them a stand down order? The mayor is viscerally anti-Trump in D.C. Did somebody say to somebody, let him in? Let's see what these Trump people can do. Let them just go down and ransack this. We're going to have cameras everywhere. It's going to look really bad. Well, how is that not possible, right? You can say that's a conspiracy theory, but why would that not happen? We have SSW Lamb says, this would not have happened if audits were allowed in states like Georgia. I'm fearful socialism will now spread unchallenged. Darkness is ahead. For some reason, I'm just a little bit more optimistic about all this. I just am. I don't know why. It could be my bubbly optimist personality, which I'm joking, it's usually not like that. If you're a regular of the program, you're probably laughing right now. You know how cynical and distrustful I am about everything. But the idea here, is, yes, this is a victory for the left, for the Democrats, for the big government people, for the anti-Trumpers. All right, let them have it, right? They got the Senate. They just won 2 seats last night. It's going to be a small majority. But people, I think, are going to see their type of governance. Okay, they govern. Look at how they govern things. Kamala Harris is from California. Joe Biden's from Delaware, right across the street from New York. That's how they operate their cities and their states, and they are a disaster. Everybody's leaving. So you just say, okay, cool. Put them in charge. Let them run the country for a little bit. Let California Kamala go into the White House. And, since Joe doesn't know where he is most of the time, Kamala's going to be running most stuff there. So we bring all those people into office and let them run the country. Let's see how it fares for them. The people are not going to be okay with that. If we have national mask mandates and national lockdowns, remember, Joe Biden said our darkest days are ahead of us after he got elected. So he's got some big plans for us. And if the country can see it on display and feel it, that may be what the country needs, right? You got to crack some eggs if you want to make an omelet. Unfortunately, we're talking about our system of government and the political world. But once they take power and they start doing some bad things, people are going to see it and respond. Or listen, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm dead wrong about this. I hope Joe Biden goes in, reforms everything, and the country's better off for it. I don't think that's going to happen. I'd be grateful if it did, because I do love the country. I want it to succeed. But I'm just not optimistic about that happening because of what they want to do. I understand what their policies are. They talk very nicely. Big fluffy goals. We want equality and healthcare and this, that, and the other, and new clean energy and blah, 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 blah. Sounds great, but when you have to put it into practice, it just doesn't work. I like their ideals. I like where they want to go. I also want clean energy. I also want people to have healthcare. I also want people to not be hungry and live where they want to live and have nice, peaceful lives. But the mechanism on getting there is just different. In my opinion, the one that works is different from anything that they're proposing. I'm open to being wrong about that, though. If they go in and they make some great changes, I'll support them. I'm not going to be just anti-Biden just because I don't like what he did in 1994 with the crime bill. I'm going to try to judge him fairly and accurately. But I do think that most people are going to see what comes to fruition, and they're not going to be particularly pleased with it. So it's all right. We have to go through a little bit of darkness in order to find the light, right? We're kind of out in the wilderness for some period of time, but it's not forever. We'll find ourselves and we'll be back. We have Aaron Seavey who says, do you think Biden's speech was live or pre-recorded today? I didn't see it, actually. I just read some of it, so I didn't see it. I actually have a hard time watching Biden. I really do. I have a hard time watching him. If I had to guess, I'd say it's pre-recorded, but that's okay. A lot of Donald Trump's speeches are pre-recorded also. So, we have another one. Kay Bean says, Rob, thanks a million for the existence system talk. It's working and I'm sharing it with all my friends. What a great contribution to all. Thanks, Kay Bean. I appreciate that. On New Year's Day on January 4th, we did a non-political show where I shared my existence system. It's a personal development little thing that I created, and I just shared it with you for free, and it's available. I hope you use it. I want to make 2021 good. And listen, if you're watching this stuff today and you're having a little bit of a panic attack, you may want to think about some of that stuff. There's breathing techniques. There's all sorts of affirmations you can put in there, and it's just kind of a good way to organize your life. It's not the only way. It's just something that's worked for me. And so if you're interested in that stuff, you can check that video out. Thanks, Kay Bean. Thanks for sharing it with your friends. I'm glad it's working for you. I would love to stay in touch and check in 3 months from now, see how it's going. We have another one. Michael Farrington says, there was not 1,000s that breached the building. We were at the Capitol in the DOJ building because we have a right to be heard, not because of Trump's orders. Yeah. So, right. And that's the other part of this. Okay. The news is saying that every single protester was sort of in the Capitol building. That's not true. It wasn't that many people. It looks like a couple hundred people who just broke in. The rest of the Trump protesters are being maligned, even though they had nothing to do with any of this stuff. But once again, they were there, right? And this is just how the world works. It's unfair as hell, but it's how it works. Thanks, Michael. Glad you were there. Glad you were safe. Sounds like you're safe. And be well, right? It's gonna be a crazy couple days, I think. Chill Bill says, today was not gross. The censorship and covering up of the fraudulent election is gross. When the law fails, lawlessness becomes the answer. Chill Bill, that doesn't sound very chill of you, my friend. It sounds like a little anti-chill. So, look, lawlessness, I just can't condone it. I can't do it. I understand the frustration about it, but when one person is harming you and you harm them back, didn't anybody's mom tell them 2 wrongs don't make a right? I think my mom might be watching this show. Mom told me 2 wrongs don't make a right since I was a kid. And I kind of live by that. So I like due process. I like lawfulness. I think that, remember this, a lot of political momentum, people accomplish their political ends because of the fact that they're seen as legitimate and credible. Legitimacy and credibility. When you breach into a building, a government building, you lose both of those things. You lose legitimacy, you lose all credibility. And they're going to paint the rest of the Trump movement or any of his supporters or anybody who's even remotely sympathetic, I'm myself included in that, are going to be labeled as conspirators, seditious traitors, treasonous, and so on and so forth. Wrongly. It's going to be, it's a malignment. It's not okay to do that, but that's just how that it works. We just got to kind of, that's the reality of the world. I know you don't like it, but that's the reality of the world. So lawlessness does more harm than good to the political maneuver, to the momentum. Doesn't work out. So if it's not effective, even though it may be therapeutic, Why are we doing that? We have Nano Bingo says, can Pence send slates back to the states for review as Penn senators request? So, I mean, he could, right? There's a lot of ambiguity in the law. His role as the president of the Senate is not specifically defined there, Nano Bingo, but he's not going to. We just read his letter. He could sort of seize upon those ambiguities, but he's not going to do it. We have another one from Rodonculus, who says Antifa BLM rioting and killing for 8 months is okay, but breaking into a government building is not. Every animal is equal, but some are more equal than others. Yeah, very big double standard. We're going to be hearing a lot about this double standard, but you know, what can we do about it? It's the media. They're going to pick the stories that they want to run with, and they're going to malign the people that they are not in agreement with, and they're going to support the people that they are in agreement with. And because they are so one-sided, most of the media, we can just predict where they're going to go on this stuff. Michael Farrington says, listens to Cruz comments. That's all we want, a review. Otherwise, we remain divided. So, yeah, I've listened to Cruz. I listened to his speech today, and we'll play it tomorrow. I mean, we'll play his and some of the other ones that we see tonight tomorrow because they're going to be going all night long. We'll do a couple more super chats. We'll check back in on Twitter. So SSW Lamb says, nothing can change unless the election process is cleaned up. No Dominion machine, voter identification, limited mail-in ballots, and no changing rules. Yes, so I would agree with that. I would actually, I think probably the best way to clean this election stuff up is to eliminate mail-in ballots unless it's absolutely necessary. You got to go vote. You need some voter ID, right? You got to have identification, and the rules don't change on a whim, right? You just can't change them. Now, I don't think any of that's going to happen. People want the mail-in ballot stuff, and it's voter suppression if you require ID, apparently. And the courts really don't care what the states do. A Supreme Court can modify the legislature, their rules, and they can get away with it. LD 2020 says, I was called a terrorist by the guy I'm dating because I support Trump, and today happened. Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness. I was called a terrorist by the guy I'm dating because I support Trump, and today happened. Okay. This is not a relationship show, but that fella, you may want to reconsider a relationship with that guy. All right. He says debated. He said the Navarro report has been debunked. How do you debate when the truth is debunked? Got no ammo. Yeah. You know, that's just hysterical. Oh, I can't get over that. Yeah. I mean, everybody's a terrorist because you support Trump. It's too funny. I'll probably get that soon here as well. Look, it's always going to be this game. Debunked. The debunk happens. Somebody presents evidence, they debunk it. Then the debunkers come out and debunk the debunkers. And everybody's arguing over, all of these permutations of the facts. I don't even know that anybody's having a real conversation about anything really anymore, right? Everything has been so twisted that it's hard to make sense of it, which we've been trying to do on this channel by looking at the primary documents, looking at the court documents, the lawsuits, the judge's orders, the language of the law. What do the rules say? What do the statutes say? What does the settlement agreement say? So that we can sort of dial in on the facts, because I got so sick of seeing the headlines all over the place. This was this and this was that, and it's like not accurate. But when you're having a debate with your significant other, I've had many debates with other significant others, and sometimes they don't go well. And that might be a good indicator that, maybe this relationship has run its course. But good luck, LD 2020. Thanks for sharing that. I'm not laughing at you. I'm just laughing at the ridiculousness of that. Like, how are you a terrorist for supporting President Trump? It's insane. I hope you don't take offense to my laughing at that, because it could be a serious problem in a relationship. We have America First. Rob, what you said earlier is correct. How can a dozen or less protesters take the Capitol without help? Backwards hat, MAGA hats, and camo is the key. Guy with horns is Antifa. At Bobby. Yeah, I mean, it's mind-blowing to me that could even happen. Unless it was sort of, kind of okay. Like, all right, they're already in, and stand down, and we don't want to get violent, right? You have to think about it from an alternative. Okay, they're violent. They want in the building. We keep them back at bay for a certain period of time until the buildings are evacuated. They all go down in the tunnels and leave. And then we just say, all right, we're not going to, pepper spray them. We're not going to rubber bulletize them. We're not going to hit them with mace. Let them in. Let them do whatever they want. What's the worst that can happen, right? So it could have been a simple stand down order that they just said, all right, we're not going to get into an altercation. I can understand that. at the same time, this is the Congressional Building. Okay, this isn't like a mall, right? This isn't something where it's okay if they just go in and ransack and run around the place. You know, this would be a major security breach. Somebody was sitting at Nancy Pelosi's desk looking through her emails. Did somebody put a USB drive in there and just download the whole hard drive? I mean, what the heck? Do they have any idea what happened in that building when people are rummaging through the Congress people's and the House representative, her literal office? That's insane. So, yeah, I mean, what does our security apparatus do if they just let people just break into whatever government house they want? Wild. Nano Bingo says more than 100 state legislators asked Pence to delay certification of electoral votes by 10 days. Yeah, I've seen a lot of that. I think I saw some out of Pennsylvania. I think Wisconsin maybe sent a letter in, but Pence isn't going to do that. We just heard from him. He's not going to do it. So, you know, all of those attempts, I think, are not even worth talking about anymore. The man who has the potential to do that has said he's not going to do that. So we've got another one from Henry Bolanos who says, I guess the election investigation is dead now, along with the evidence of fraud. Yeah. So they're going to use this to really squash all of that. They're going to say, we told you so. These people are maniacs. They're out of control. Everything that they were talking about was wrong and conspiratorial. See, look what they did. And they're going to use that as justification, right? I mean, one of the things that we've been talking about here is what's the harm in talking about ideas? What's the harm in just having a conversation about it? We have said it multiple times. We like to explore ideas, kind of pick this one up off the shelf, open it up, examine it, play some mental gymnastics about it, you know, have conversations in favor, have conversations opposed, and just have a dialogue, because that's more useful than telling somebody, oh, you think this was fraudulent? Shut your mouth, sit down, don't ever talk about it again. It's more useful to have a conversation about it. Some of them are good ideas. Some of them are terrible ideas. Many of the time, I just kind of talk about it and then leave it up to you, the viewer, to decide. But now they're going to be able to go, well, we told you so. They're all violent. You simply talking about this stuff is encouraging the violence. See what you've done. How could you do such a thing? And then that's going to be the impetus, I think, to sort of, taper down on the conversations about a lot of this stuff, which is unfortunate. It's not good for anybody. We have another one. COVID-19 lockdowns, big government, social media censorship, election irregularities, media bias, and deep state. Rob, thanks for the good coverage. Thanks, SSW Lamb. I appreciate it. You know, I didn't know what we were going to talk about today. I was watching this all unfold, and I was just like, I got to go talk about this in an hour. I don't even know what's going to come out because it was so crazy. You know, it was one of those days that was just every time I was looking on Twitter, every time I refreshed the screen, there's somebody else with another picture. Then I click it again. Some guy's in some congressperson's office with his feet on the table making a phone call. And you're going, what? This is like bizarro world. But we're doing our best to mutter on through this, and I appreciate you being here and showing lots of love today, SSWLM. I appreciate that. We have another one from TPRDFH51 says, love your show from the great white north, Rob. Sorry to say, but I think your country is slowly and inexorably heading towards a civil war. Sad times, mates. It doesn't look good right now. I would agree with that. If you're sort of on the outside looking in, you're looking at the headlines, you're looking at the news, you're looking at all of the posts and the pictures, and you're going, this is pretty bad. This is rough. I would agree with that. It looks really bad. I just don't think it is all of that bad. I mean, yes, let me not sort of dismiss the severity of what happened today. Okay, we had a congressional hearing that was interrupted by an unruly mob with the intention of disrupting it to do, Lord knows what, but it really wrecked the process of what we were supposed to be accomplishing today. Awful. Somebody died. Okay, other people are in the hospital. Awful. Don't support it. Don't condone it. Never would. But is America ripping itself apart because of what happened today? I don't think so. I really don't. I think that it's election aftermath that has been certainly amplified by a lot of people out there, Trump's included. A lot of other people have been really amplifying the volume on this stuff, talking about martial law, seizing stuff, and so on. So the volume's high. People are pissed. They're angry. This is just kind of a rough political season for America. Is this going to result in the country splitting apart? I don't think so. Are the Republicans going to have some problems? Yeah, definitely. The Republican Party might have basically be ineffective for the foreseeable future. But the country, I think, is just going to move on just fine. But I thank you for your input. We have another one from True Skeptic. Says, just think, this may have been avoided had the supers just given us anything. Don't care anymore, pack it. No decisions are just as bad. So the supers, maybe you're saying the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court judges, if they would have given us something, they really didn't. They denied a couple petitions for a writ of certiorari going into the Supreme Court. They didn't give us much there. We got a little bit of a statement from Judge Alito and from Judge Thomas, and I think Gorsuch was in on one of those as well. But that's it, right? Nothing hit the docket, really, in terms of anything of substance in the Supreme Court, and a lot of people were looking for them to help us settle some of this out. We've got a big problem with two branches of government, the Congress and the executive branch, which is why we have a third branch of government called the judiciary, which should help settle some of this stuff. They were asleep at the wheel. And here we are duking it out between the other two branches. Beth Coddington says, thank you, Robert. I'll try to turn my frown upside down. Good, Beth. It's going to be all right. Everything's going to be fine. Feels like a rough day, but this is politics being politics. And unfortunately, sometimes it gets bad. It gets rough, but they're going to get back to business. The country's going to go on. We're all going to be fine. And we have Jay Mill who says, if this all passes and Biden gets in, will they be allowed to do a real audit of the 6 swing states post-inauguration to prove fraud and give the states some momentum to write real voter ID laws? So it depends on who you're asking about. Will they be allowed to do a real audit? I don't know who you're referencing specifically. And I would say that at this point in time, the answer is probably no, right? Audits are expensive. They cost a lot of money. I think Donald Trump paid for a partial re-audit in Wisconsin, and it costs, I think, $3 million to re-audit a couple counties. So the question will be, if Joe Biden is the next president, who's going to fork up the money to go do these audits? Is there going to be any political capital to go and accomplish that? Probably not, right? At that point in time, they're going to say this is done and over, closed door. We're going to move on to the next chapter in this country. And that's going to be a major bummer for a lot of the people who want to see some momentum about electoral reform. So that's going to, I think, have to be its own separate entity. The idea that we're going to be able to piggyback on any of this 2020 election stuff into, forward progress, forward momentum, I think is probably unlikely. I think today made it less likely. People were angry, but a lot of people saw this and they said, all right, that's enough of that, right? I don't want to be on that team anymore. I don't like that team. I don't like what I saw. That team is gross to me, and so I'm going to bail out of it. And it's hard to seize on political momentum when people are abandoning ship. So I think that it's still a very important issue, a pertinent issue. I've said this before, well before today, that if there's a local politician who calls you asking for money or sends you a campaign letter or shows you an ad on Facebook, the first question before you donate $1 is, what's your position on electoral security, on voter integrity? What do you intend to do about that? If the answer is nothing, well, just pick another candidate. Find somebody who will make that the spearhead of their campaign, and then maybe we'll see some actual change, but it has to start locally. Because the people in office just don't, at the federal level, I think they're too unreachable, they're too far removed from us, and they just don't care. We have another one, several, from S. Love says, so is there any country that has ever been free without bloodshed? Is it okay to kill our troops to liberate and promote freedom for other countries, but not our own country? S. Love says, we lost the Senate, major fraud. You honestly believe that our country is just going to go back to normal? Come on, seriously. So S. Love, I can see that you're frustrated and you're angry a little bit. I understand your frustration here. Has any country ever been free without bloodshed? I don't know. Probably, maybe, right? I mean, have countries peacefully seceded from one another without a war? I would guess that probably that's happened. Is it okay to kill our troops to liberate and promote freedom of other countries, but not our own countries? Generally, no, right? I mean, I don't support wars to go and build other nations that America doesn't have an interest in, right? I want the world to be well, but it's not America's responsibility to go fix everything everywhere. And yeah, we just did lose the Senate, S. Love. And when I say the country's going to go back to normal, I'm not saying that, it's going to go back to, Trump's version of normalcy. That era is sort of gone. America is going to change. It's going to change in a Biden direction. Probably more, more regulations across the board. I would imagine higher taxes. I would say less sort of, personal physical autonomy with some of the COVID restrictions and things. Like the country is going to change. When I say normal, I don't mean that it's going to be everything like, candy and rainbows in this country. It is going to change dramatically. The Democrats are going to really probably, run roughshod over the Supreme Court and most of the country because they can. They have the White House, the House, and the Senate. So brace yourself for some of that stuff. Are they going to, immediately turn our country into a socialist hellhole? No. I mean, the mechanisms of government are just too slow moving by design. Remember, the founders were pretty brilliant in this. They really made it difficult for anything to get done. And that's awesome because that means that even though they have the Senate, it's a real small majority and there's going to be a lot of political opposition. People are already talking about calling Joe Manchin and Susan Collins and making sure that they remember what their constituencies look like in their states and that they're not safe blue or safe red. They can be, sort of flip and move things around, but they've got 2 years until the senators are up again, until the Republicans are up again for re-election. And so the Republicans can take back the House if they get their act together, and they can take back the Senate with just a couple flips, right? So this whole thing could be flopped back dramatically in 2 short years. And if I had to guess, I would say that it is, right? We got 2 years of this stuff. And so we'll see what damage they can do between now and then. But I'm just not of the mindset that the country is going to be, hit in the head with a wrecking ball just because we have Joe Biden in office. I think that he's very, very bland, very standard fare. Him versus, let's say, Elizabeth Warren, or even him versus Kamala Harris. I think there's a pretty big distinction there because Joe Biden is a lot more moderate than some of those other individuals. So I'm hopeful that the country is going to be just fine. But I understand the frustration. I mean, a lot of people are feeling really, really down on themselves today, and for good reason. There are losses across the country for Republicans, for Trumpists, for people who are concerned about sort of an ever expanding government, and rightfully so. It's kind of a rough day. I understand the frustration. Hang in there, S-Love. Thanks for the messages. Thanks for the chats. I really do appreciate you being here, and I hope you do well. All right, shoot. What did I just do? I just clicked the button way too many times. All right, so here we are. We got one from Zara. PhD says, a note to say thanks. Tough day. Big opinions. All the adults in the room will let you have your own opinion because you're entitled and your legal analysis is valuable. Thanks, Zara. I appreciate that. It's one of those things where it's kind of hard to articulate all of the thoughts that are going through your head on a day like today. And I was struggling with that. I've got so much to say, and I've got a lot of anger and a lot of emotion and a lot of frustration and sort of disdain for a lot of the people that we saw today, and all sorts of emotions running around. And so even though I'm sort of practice in law of controlling my emotions and, arguing in front of a court of law and making arguments without getting knocked off balance one way or the other, days like today are still sort of rattling a little bit. So when I came on the show, I was just going to try to be authentic and just try to convey what my experience was throughout this day, go through a little bit of legal analysis, address some sort of, arguments from both sides of the aisle. I'm not under the guise that what I'm saying today is going to be well received by everybody. It's probably alienating half the people on the channel right now, but this is just my take on it, and we may lose a lot of subscribers. A lot of people are bailing out. I understand it. I wish that they wouldn't because, we're going to talk about some more positive things in the future, but I understand it, right? And this is part of what we're doing here. We're going to take 1 step forward, or 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 step forward, 1 step back. And we're going to be seeing that a lot for the foreseeable future. All around the country, people are going to be making movements and losing, and there's going to be a reshuffling, sort of a realignment of a lot of the conservative, libertarian, freedom-loving ideals. They're all going to have to reorient themselves for a sort of post-Trump era, which is scary, and it's a little bit frustrating, and it's a little bit, it's like, well, he was leading the charge in many ways, but that's okay because it's like, what else can come out of that? What can we create? How can the country be better The country didn't like what they had the last 4 years, apparently. Okay, well, that means that there needs to be a restructuring. And I'm looking forward to being a part of that conversation. And I'm glad that you are too, Zara. Thanks for being here. We have another one. It says, it's from a not a banned account. It says, what does voting for elections matter when election vote counting stop when Republicans start getting had ballots found? Dems always win. I noticed that in Georgia last night. There was a lot of claims that the votes literally stopped being counted at like 2 a.m, just like the last time. I haven't had the time to dive into any of the Georgia stuff, but I understand your point. There's a lot of frustration going on with how these elections are being run. Chill Bill says, I just want justice to be served. I blame our government and our justices for not doing their job. This is only going to escalate. I hope it doesn't, but I understand your point there. For not doing their job, this is only going to escalate. I really hope that it does not. Okay, I'm not condoning that at all. I would like to see more level heads on this stuff. The Senate is back in session right now. Let's take a look over on Twitter and see what they have to say. All right, so back on Twitter, we have, let's see what's trending. Mitt Romney's trending, pro-Trump crowds, world leaders condemn disgraceful scene. All right, so... Okay, nothing there. I'm sure there's probably a C-SPAN or something where they're back in the chambers. Let's fly through some more super chats, and then we'll get out of here for the day. We've got SSW Lamb. It says CCP is LOL. Will the Dems now pack the Supreme Court, create additional states, increase taxes, mandate more lockdowns, and Antifa destroying the cities? Probably. Yeah, probably. I mean, you would have to imagine that if you're a Democrat right now, you're doing cartwheels in your living room because Supreme Court is now open. They can add 5 justices if they want, and why wouldn't they? Additional states, yeah, they could create a permanent... Is this still streaming? They could create a permanent